I am on the clock in 24 slow drafts. We're going to make all those picks today. We're back with all sorts of slow draft picks to make. This is Stealing Signals. Let's go. What is up? Appreciate you guys hanging out. GMs. I got a whole bunch of drafts to start picking. Pretty soon we're going to get into the 4-hour time limit. Oh, you know what? I made a channel in my Discord to announce when I go live in case people want to hang out. So I'm going to do that real quick. YouTube live streams at here. Live now. Look at that. Half you guys just got a notification. I always get hyper close to sending out the actual StreamYard link, and all you guys can just pile in and come be my guests. What's up, Steph? What's up, Johnny Footballs? All you guys, what is going on? What does this say? Heavy stack, week 12. Big Eliminator. We're here. We're hanging. We're rolling. We're rolling in the got the Ninja Turtles, the king of the slow drafts, rocking the Turtles. Had to bring it back. All right, let's do some picks. It's all early round stuff. I could do all these in like 10 minutes, so definitely drop some questions in the chat. There's not a whole lot to worry about. I mostly am just kind of taking best player available in a lot of these spots. Like this one's a Breece Hall. I'm not going to take Gibbs. I do have my rankings in here. Talk through those if you guys have questions. I'm deferring to ADP a little bit. Like, for example, I should flip Waddle over Olave. Once I see the ADP is the other way, I've been taking Waddle ahead of Olave. But like this type of pick is pretty easy. I really like Nico. If I sort by ADP, he's the top receiver. I already took Breece. I need to get a receiver in the second. Like, I'm not gonna override that. I typically just swim with the fishes on it. I don't mind so much about getting super unique in the early rounds. In fact, like some of the combos I really like, I want multiple versions of it. Now, a big reason for this is probably just my limited experience because last year I had multiple versions of my best early, opening combos get really far, like get into the week 16 and all that kind of stuff. I know I had like a McCaffrey, and I can't remember who I had a couple of McCaffreys that were live that had very similar players in like round 2 and round 3. And it's nice when I don't know. I mean, it's nice when they go right, obviously, because all right, well, now I have different configurations of this team, right? Like if I have something to help it get through, then it's going to help it get through. And I know I had some Tyreek teams. I know all of my best teams were like Keenan Allen, Mike Evans teams, which were in the middle. And I was just like in love whenever I opened up a team and had those guys stacked in the middle rounds in my receiver builds. Cause it just, to get those hits in rounds 4 and 6 at wide receiver really lengthens your build, Here's a fun question. Make a stand in round 1 and push for 20% plus on a player or 2 or smooth out across the first rounders. I'm a little bit of both. I've seen my buddy, we got Bullock in the chat. He's in all these drafts with me. He messages me that he's entered 150 slows. He's been a long time stealing signal, stealing bananas guy. I did a Dynasty startup with him a couple years ago. He was messaging me. He listened to mine and Sean's Dynasty startup podcast on stealing bananas like 3 times in a row, and then was doing all the stuff way more effectively than even I was doing it. He was really into it, and it was annoying the shit out of me. He was trading back, acquiring like other people's future first-round picks, and it was like, well, that's making it a lot harder for me to do that. Well, now he enters 150 slow drafts. I go enter 40 BBMs, and he's in all 40 of them. So he's He's taking notes and probably gonna use it all against me. This question here. I know my buddy Pete Overzet's talked about trying to smooth out the first round. I'm not that way. I'm very comfortable taking stands anywhere in the draft, early if necessary. That said, I don't have any, like, it would require me to have first round picks I really want to be fading, and I don't have any that I really want to be fading. One player that I realize that I'm pretty underweight on is AJ Brown, because I'm the big stand for me is Garrett Wilson. And so I took Garrett Wilson over AJ Brown quite a bit. Don't have a lot of AJ Brown builds. Went out of my way to get one over Garrett Wilson. I think I only got one in this batch as well. And I don't have a ton and then the other one is Brees, who I don't take it unless he slides typically, because I was taking Bijan over Brees quite a bit. But I've gotten Brees to like 6%. AJ Brown's more at like 2 or 3%, which is not something that I like or want to be at on AJ Brown. It's more of a product of the Garrett Wilson element. I'm also like at like 5% on Jamar Chase, because I did take some Jefferson over Chase. I just maybe haven't hit his spot as much. I tried to just take him more in this batch, but I'm also okay with that position. I think Jefferson is just as well as Chase, and I think Tyreek is clearly in a tier above and Lamb. And so, like, if, I would never take Chase in the top 3 based on that. I'm trying to get my exposure to the top 3 guys in the top 3. And then, I take Chase at 4 sometimes, but I think I've also taken other guys at 4 because I think Chase is a part of that tier back there, but comfortably goes at 4. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe I just don't have as many 104s. I'm taking him by ADP when I get him, but I have a lot more Jefferson, which is interesting because just a week or so ago, I was, defending being too low on Jefferson basically in my home league ranks. But I'm not, Jefferson's one of my higher BBM first round exposures now, which is more about landing spot. So I don't typically like to take the worst pick just to balance my exposures. Which is maybe or almost certainly wrong. It's something that I'm going to have to grapple with this year, as I did more drafts this year than ever before. Really just started doing best ball drafts last year because of the jurisdictional stuff. So yeah, anyway, a lot of intriguing, layers to that. But yeah, no, I believe this point here that Roheen makes, that the first round, and I say your name differently every time, and I apologize for that, buddy. First round feels too strong to fade, unlike Eckler and Kelsey last year. Yeah, great example. I was underweight on Eckler for sure last year, and I think Kelsey really felt the burn ranking CMC and Tyreek behind JJ, Chase, and Kupp last year. So he's saying last year he had CMC ranked quite a bit lower and Tyreek ranked quite a bit lower, and then didn't get the 8%. And then when you don't have any builds that start with those guys and they're the first rounders you need, that you really feel that burn. See, I didn't feel that. That's an intriguing perspective, because I actually, took my CMCs, even though I was kind of lower on him. I was pretty high on Tyreek, and I certainly got plenty of Tyreeks. I landed, I think I had Kupp over Tyreek for a lot of the offseason. That's right. But I landed in that 103 range a ton in my first drafts. And so I was just balancing the Kupp and Tyreek stuff. I would compare that to like Chase and Jefferson this year, where I kind of just see them as interchangeable. So I was just like, oh, I'll have 50% of each. Chad says, if Brees is who you need, I'm ruined. I'm a little worried about that as well, to be honest. Oh, this is funny. Johnny Football said, stayed up late one night last week to finish entering the slow puppy to get different textured rooms. And in every draft, it ends up being me, Pat, and sacrilegious. That's very, very funny. Yeah, I mean, this is a good point to hear from our buddy Serum in the Discord. Lawrence Bailey, first round guys are always guys that can bury you. So a full fade is dangerous. 4% probably the floor. Happy to get close to 15 to 20 if I really like the guy. The problem is the math doesn't really math here, right? Like if you get to 15 to 20%, you are cutting someone out unless everyone's just going down to like 6 or 4, or 5 or 4, right? Because like most of my guys, I'm just at 8 on when I was looking through it. I have a couple that I'm at like 9 or 10. Lamb, I'm at like 10. Oh, Tyreek Hill, I was a little lower on, which you guys know that the first slow drafts, I was taking him like 101 in some of these, and I had him at like 5%. So try to get a little more of him. It's just, again, distribution of draft slot there. As soon as I got Lamb over Tyreek, I started getting a lot of 102s. And I thought I had taken so much Tyreek before that I was like, oh, I'll just take a bunch of Lambs. And then I realized I have double the Lamb over Tyreek, which is not really what I was trying to do there. But yeah, it's hard. Like I have Garrett at like 15%, but as a result, I have AJ Brown at like, I think it's like legitimately like 2%. It's below 4. It doesn't totally add up. You have to cut out somebody. Oh yeah, full fading St. Brown seems fine. I don't hate this position. I don't know. Like the issue is like, what if he's the guy you need in the playoffs, right? Like he can obviously do 15 target games back to back to back. So, that's probably where that's tricky, but I do think he's a little bit overpriced. A little bit. What's up, Tyler? Yeah, we got the crew hanging out. All right. We got to make some picks. I took Nico. Big Eliminator. $100. Started this one, Garrett Wilson, Debo. Debo's got the nice buy, a really nice pick at 17 there. I'm trying to figure out the zoom. Mike Evans comes all the way back to 32. I have him very low in my ranks. I have him behind a Diggs. And I don't know that the big eliminator is where I want to go get my Mike Evans exposure. I don't know if I've taken Mike Evans in a single draft. But I was looking at my projections the other day because I was talking a little bit about total air yards. I do ADOT. I project total volume, right? And so then I project out an air yards number, which I think is a relevant thing to kind of think through. It's part of the reason on the Amon-Ra point, like Mr. Mister says, 14 dome games this year for ARSB. There's a lot of stuff to really like about him. The thing that would be the counter would be, I look at my projections of the top, I don't know. I guess I'm going to say 9 receivers and go through Drake London. I'd have to go all the way to Debo, who's my wide receiver 14, to find someone with fewer air yards than Amon-Ra, which is air yards is targets related. I have Amon-Ra projected for 160 targets. Some of these guys are only projected for 140. Let's just share the screen. Instead of me trying to explain all this, let's just pull up my projections. This is like the wide receiver list. So I'm looking at column L, air yards here. I'll just sort by it. So part of the reason I went here is I noticed that Mike Evans is actually, I'm projecting him for the second most air yards. He's a high ADOT guy. He gets a lot of targets, even though I'm projecting his target rate to come down a little bit. Like this is why he still consistently wins over Godwin. Is it's a high ADOT in his 130 targets. Even if Godwin gets similar, it's air yards, man. When it hits, like even if he's not that efficient, which I have his efficiency dropping off, that's helpful. I was kind of questioning this. Like, why am I fading Evans so much when I'm projecting for the second most air yards in the NFL? I had a CeeDee Lamb. And then I got, Jefferson and Olave is a big reason I like Olave. A lot of targets at a high ADOT, a lot of air yards. That's good. Those are good things. It's not the only thing. Amon-Ra adds a lot after the catch. He's very good at depth adjusted efficiency. It's not a massive issue, but you'll notice he's not even on this first page, right? I got to go way down here. Amon-Ra St. Brown's at 1,241 air yards, 159 targets, right? No one else in this range really even close. Chase is the other guy, 160 targets, doesn't have a ton of air yards because he's got a lower ADOT as well. But, he's still 250 yards ahead of Amon-Ra. So if I go back to sorting, like, the top receivers, these projections have not been updated since July. This is just like where I landed. It's just an interesting, thought process. Again, the air yards here for Amon-Ra, I've highlighted it here compared to the other guys around him. Chase, not too much ahead of him. But most of these other dudes, I mean, this is where I get to like Garrett Wilson having such an aggressive projection. It's like, yeah, it's efficiency, but also, I mean, he's going to be an air yards guy. Like compared to Amon-Ra, he's got 500 more air yards. Jefferson's got 500, 600 more air yards. Right. And the thing with Jefferson is when I did this projection, his efficiency, I had it kind of toned down. And that was something that Pat and Davis both pushed back on. And I thought through, and I think they were right. I think I pushed down his efficiency too much, which was purely because I was already projecting Sam Darnold for career high efficiency. But they're basically like, Kevin O'Connell's good enough that he could have career high efficiency and then some. Like I was worried about, I'm projecting Sam Darnold to be much, much better than he's ever been. And anyway, all that stuff has to fit together. But just what's available from a volume sense is one of the interesting elements of a projection, right? Like what does this guy's profile look like? Receivers tend to own their ADOTs. What does his volume projection look like? And so what does that mean for his projected air yards, which is an important thing. Now, Mike Evans is not going to add any yards after the catch. This is a dude that is a high ADOT guy that doesn't add a lot of yak. Amon-Ra is absolutely adding yak a ton, which lower targets have yak in a way that deeper targets don't. So you'd already expect him to add more yak, but he's also very good at it for his ADOT. And Evans is one of those deep threats who's not, I mean, even for a deep threat, Evans has just never been one who adds yak. He's a ball winner, but he's not gonna break a bunch of tackles. He's not gonna go AJ Brown after the catch, So you'd expect a massive gap between Amon-Ra's total yards after the catch and Mike Evans. Let's put some numbers to that. Let's just go look at their total yak last year while we're talking through this, because I want to think through this Mike Evans pick. Because I do have him projected for a much weaker racer, a much weaker conversion rate of those air yards. And so is that fair? Well, part of the reason that would be fair is yak. So Evans last year actually had 322 yards after the catch by Pro Football Focus. That was a career high, or at least back to 2018, which is how long their database goes. He's never been at 300 otherwise. A lot of years at 250 and lower. Yak per reception, 4.1 last year, in the threes for most of his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown last year had 666 yards after the catch. His yak per reception was 5.6. Again, a lot of Evans years were in the threes, so we're talking double. This was, before I had even looked at the numbers, was purely just me knowing their profiles, but obviously the data backs up what I just told you guys. You get, 4.7, 4.6, and 5.6 yards after the catch per reception for Amon-Ra. That's just going to change the calculus quite a bit. But we're not comparing Evans to Amon-Ra in this draft because we don't have Amon-Ra on the board. We have Evans at 308, and I'm pretty I don't understand this question, Black Mighty River. So what's your buy strategy in the Eliminator? Week 12 seems nice. I mean, we don't want to stack buys. So week 12 does have a lot of good players. I want to space buys out. That's part of the reason Evans is also intriguing, is week 11's not a week that I spent a lot of time on in my wide receiver builds. It's got Arizona. Who else is week 11? I take some Trey McBride, but I usually don't take a lot of late week 11. I mean, look at this. I can't even find the other players. Carolina, I guess I take some Deontay for sure, especially in these eliminators. That's an interesting one. Carolina does create a bit of a log jam there. Oh, and the Giants. I don't take a lot of Giants. I guess I take some late Wandale sometimes. Yeah, maybe. This is another good note from Amari. I shouted him out in my last article from the comments. He said we need to chat about JSN being a big tier break above Odunze. I've got JSN's ranking really aggressive in my redraft ranks, but I do see JSN and Odunze very close. We had that discussion in our mini-sodes episode, our first main event with Pat and Pete. And I think you could argue that Odunze should go ahead of JSN. I got to think through that one. It's another good one. I like your feedback, Amari. Keep it coming. He had a good note in the article about Kyler Williams. Kylan. My God, why do I keep doing that? Kyron Williams. Kylan. I have a cousin's son is Kylan, and a friend's son is Kylan. And then there's Kyler Murray that I always get caught in there. And then I can't get to Kyron sometimes. Kyron Williams broke his hand during the playoff game. I had written recently about how he didn't play a ton in that playoff game. And a good reminder from Amari that was largely because of injury. It wasn't like anything that Kyron didn't do. Kind of looking through the chats a little bit. Yeah, like Tyler said, I have a decent chunk of Evans for the single week chasing. That's where I worry with the eliminator element here, right? Is like, can he be too up and down? But like the way that he scores touchdowns, I mean, he probably hits your lineup a decent. The number of air yards like is a little bit of a floor element too, obviously, right? Like some weeks he might not get too many targets, but he doesn't need a lot of targets to hit your lineup. He could hit your lineup in 3 targets because they can have a really high ADOT. Can be a lot of air yards to that profile. I take so much Diggs. I was looking at my exposures before this run, and Diggs is way, way up there for me. I've obviously certainly gotten a lot of Dells as well, excuse me. And they both have the week 14 bye, which is probably a little bit tougher to navigate. I'm not sure I'll get Deontay at his price anymore. I think I'm talking myself into Evans. I mean, it's like this is going to be one build where I get a little bit of a higher price. The reason I was so hesitant, I do think he's the right pick, is that it's $100 eliminator, and I only get it's a 5 max contest. I really like the eliminator. I only get 5 shots at it. I want to get my guys in these builds. Why am I taking a guy that I don't take anywhere in that build? But I mean, 308 for Mike Evans is a really nice price, ultimately. So we're gonna go with it. I do think the eliminator actually does play into him a little. What else we got? What else did I see here in the chat that I wanted to pull up? Oh, Lundar here said I wasn't as high on Christian Kirk as some early on. Now with this fall, should I scoop him? He kind of rose so much that the fall, if I'm not mistaken, is putting him like right back where he was, right? Like, yeah, 49.9 is still like higher than I was taking him in the 5th for a while. But yeah, I mean, I think in the 5th round, he's a good pick. It got tougher in the 4th. Yeah, I have him like in my redraft ranks right by Jaden Reed and Terry McLaurin. I have him ahead of those guys. I like Jaden Reed, but this is where Kirk belongs. I tend to take more Keenan Allen, but I mean the Keenan Allen weight stuff is who knows? Who knows, right? All right, let's get yeah, I mean the ADP is so much different than the last time I went through my slows. It's so much different. Like especially if Rice is off the board, like I mean, the last time my slows got through that range, dude, Rice was going so much later. It's been kind of wild to adjust the lack of daily drafting, but hopefully that adds a little bit of color too. When I'm surprised by some of the stuff, you guys that are drafting every day maybe aren't noticing how much things are changing because it's very noticeable to me. Rashee Rice has flown way up there and should. Talked about that on multiple streams recently. Artillery Frost says, what is Debo's? I assume you meant his air yards. They were quite low. They were below 1,000. I think Amon-Ra was around 1,200. Debo's was like 800, I want to say. But then I have like 40 something rushes for him. And it's also super dependent on whether Ayuk's in there. If you told me Ayuk was not in there, if you go look at his usage throughout his career, Debo's air yards spike when Ayuk's not in. So, I mean, that's a big, big part of it. Stephanie, Rice is noticeable to us too. Yeah, he's a good example of one that I think everybody's aware that he's been climbing. That's an interesting one from Terrence here. I think you underestimate the lack of a big back in Tampa. Evans is the goal line receiver, essentially. Yeah, I mean, that's useful on a weekly basis. It 13 touchdowns on 28 pass TDs last year for the team. Like, had almost 50% of their pass TDs. It's pretty huge. I don't know how much to regress that or not. Godwin had 2, and it's like, yeah, I mean, that's all it was a 13-2. Like the rest of their production was fairly similar, and it's like how. But at the same time, I don't think that Godwin's going to take a ton of those. Like, I think Evans is going to score a lot of touchdowns again. So, anyway, that's an interesting one. Let's go jump on this Schnauzer. Let's make some quick picks here. We got Lamb and Olave. We're just going to grab Devonta Smith. I got Lamb at 103 here. So now I get Devonta at 303. Obviously, you get the Lamb Devonta correlation. I think he makes a lot of sense on that pick. Let's jump into a BBM where we start with Bijan. We're back in the second. I've got Debo at the top of the queue. I'm going to go there. I've been getting a lot of Debo in this little batch. It's sounding more and more like Ayuk's going to come back. I do think so. So Debo's sliding a little. I do think Debo still makes sense here. Like if I was drafting live drafts and not a whole batch of slows, I think the possibility that Ayuk still gets traded is large enough. It's not large, but it's large enough that it puts Debo at the top of this tier. Because if that trade does happen, I do think it's a meaningful impact on Debo. Even if that percentage is 10 or 15%, like we were kind of guessing on ship chasing. I said I thought it was maybe more like 25. I think that's probably high. But I don't think it's a lock that Ayuk's definitely staying in San Fran. The reason I think he's probably going to is as more time goes, is it's clear that he has an offer on the table that is not up to the offer he could get in Pittsburgh or elsewhere. But it's also, to me, fairly evident that if somewhere else is where he wanted to be and he like all he cared about was the contract, that like he would have probably taken that fairly quickly and been like, okay, you guys aren't giving me more, because the Niners have made it clear they're not giving more. But if he was going to go back to the Niners, there's an element where he could be like, fine, I'll just show up for week 1. Right? Like the fact that he's stretching it out, like if he signs now, then he has to show up to camp. If he stretches it out and says that he's not sure or whatever, I mean, I do think it's pretty likely that he ultimately just signs with the Niners at the end of that. It'd be kind of weird to then say, yeah, I'm going to, I prefer the trade. I want to go elsewhere and get paid more. I'm not going to sign your deal. I'm going to hold out, whatever, at the end of this, So every day that it doesn't happen, I think you're more likely to get. This is true. If what I just described is true, especially, he'll need to work into his role. He's been sitting a long time. I don't think he's going to have a good start to the season at all. I mean, I feel like I missed this. Is this Deontay Johnson's groin injury? I've been head down this week. I don't even see that Deontay has a groin injury. Severe? We're doing research. Day-to-day with mild groin strain 2 days ago. I missed that. I always get so annoyed when I miss something like this. He's sliding all the way to 80. That's, I mean, hell yeah. Hopefully he's still there when I get down there. I appreciate that you appreciate this. I think it's Ian. I sent a little newsletter this morning that I wouldn't be able to do the updates. You said knowing when there won't be updates is helpful. Avoids the should I hold my slow picks for the update thing. Yeah, that's what I was thinking through, is that I didn't want people confused about that. Naked QB in the big eliminator. I'm okay with it. I don't think stacking's like a huge. The reason I prefer stacking is not for week 17. It's more because like I do think you want upside every week, right? Like you kind of want to correlate some outcomes and get some. You're going to need some of that stuff to just kind of fit together well when you have an inordinate amount of buys. One of your other stacks really hits. It would be great, right? It would cover you. But no, I mean, I agree. I'm not like super concerned about stacking in that contest. And I think having a naked QB in some ways arguably is, can be beneficial for a floor, right? It's like if the quarterback really tanks, it doesn't tank multiple skill position players with you. Like if you have your number one pick receiver tied to a QB that's really important to your build, and that QB has a horrible week 1 week and it takes down your number one receiver with him, you've now created a floor scenario for you in that week to go out. And so the naked thing, I think, does help the floor a little bit by spreading out your bets, right? So I certainly don't think it's out of pocket or, in a strategy that you cannot do. Can I sell you a little bit on Lamar? QB3, ceiling's clear, but a bit worried about Harbaugh's love of the run in the red zone. I know you got Henry leading the league in rush TDs. Yeah, I mean, the biggest reason I went there, you said finding it tough to reconcile the 4-round gap over Daniels. I mean, you're not going to – I mean, I've had Daniels ranked really aggressively since before preseason week 1. Like, I very much agree that Daniels is a multi-round strong pick, right? Like I've been pretty much comparing Anthony Richardson to Daniels as my reason for not being super in on Anthony Richardson since I don't know, I started doing these videos. Like you guys know that I like Daniels a lot, the profile. So the Lamar question would be separate from Jaden Daniels, who's a different conversation to me. Because like Daniels could get hurt. I mean, the thing you don't want to do is get caught on a later bet that you love. I did this the Trey Lance year, and I loved Jalen Hurts, and I took all the Trey Lance and only had like 2 important teams with Hurts. I had a main event with Sean where I talked him into Hurts, and that was pretty sick. But that team had some other key injuries. So much Lance that year. He gets hurt in the second game, and probably just wasn't going to be good. But that's the year that I had the really strong Hurts projection. I've written about this before. Had a bright red note in my projection sheet. It was the only note on any of my 32 teams when I went back and reviewed it at the end of the year, talking about Jalen Hurts passing efficiency because it was his first year with A.J. Brown, and it was like, need to circle back on this Jalen Hurts projection. All bright red. And I never did circle back. I still had this massive Jalen Hurts projection that was like, he's got A.J. Brown now. The efficiency shoots up. This gets back to that Justin Jefferson conversation we were talking about earlier, where like Sam Darnold, similar point. Justin Jefferson could just raise your efficiency. Like Sam Darnold's never had Justin Jefferson, right? That's why he's never had better efficiency than he's had. That's one way of framing it. Anyway, I'm off on 3 tangents, but the question was about Lamar Jackson, and you don't want to get caught up with the Jaden Daniels thing to not take exposure to other QBs that you like, because Daniels could fail. Lamar's this is great. Lamar has receiving TD upside this year from Henry. I like that. Lamar's upside case is crystallized for me when I did my first main event live draft with the ship chasing guys and Sacrilegious and Pat were so on the Ravens pass rate element, and they made some really strong cases that their defense was so good last year. I went back and looked at my numbers. Their expected pass rate was really low, but their PROE, pass rate over expected, was actually pretty neutral. But it stayed low because their expected pass rate was so low because their defense was so good. So some defensive regression puts them into more pass situations, does force the expected pass rate to come up. And what we did see from Monken last year was a willingness to be close to neutral in pass rate over expected. So if the expected pass rate comes up, you'd expect the pass rate to come up. It would be a little bit higher than it's been in basically every year of Lamar's career, other than 2021. That's the one year where they threw a ton. Their pass rate was really high. Mark Andrews was a stud that year, etc. they're using that that sort of logic about Monken and the pass rate to be pretty in on Andrews. And we also took Zay Flowers on that team. And, Sacrilegious especially really wanted to make a systemic bet on Baltimore's pass rate rising. The point I was trying to make to him is that it can rise and still be in this limbo range that's not actually making all the Baltimore players a smash. And I do believe that very strongly. I think that he was overstating it and Pat was overstating it. And I've told them that. We've had long conversations. Like, I think they're not like wrong of ways that it could go, but I think there's a huge range of outcomes where they could be right and not get paid off on it. And I one of the things I said to them is there's like a dozen other team level trends like this that I'd like to make big bets on. And I think like the degree to which it sounded like they were pretty focused on the Baltimore pass rate one, to me, was like, it's not that much of a better bet to me than a dozen other potential team bets that I think you could make. But I think to them, it is. It's a clear one that you really need to make a bet on. So that's fine. It's just a slight disagreement. But that whole conversation for me was like, well, that doesn't make me really want to get on Andrews or Zay Flowers that much more. But if it does, the pass rate does rise into a range that's higher than most of Lamar's seasons, but not so high that it makes the receiving weapons super great. Lamar is a dynamic and unique rushing quarterback. I mean, all you got to do is, and let's just do it because, I like to jump around with my screen shares. Let's just go and look at his rush yards versus other rushing quarterbacks. I don't think people do this kind of stuff enough. Let's just look at his actual stats. Okay. Lamar Jackson. Rushing stats. 2019, his first, real full season, 1,200 rushing yards, 1,000 the next year. In the 700s, the 2 years after, but he played 12 games both years. There's this yards per game column right here. He was at 80 that first year, then 67, then 64, then 63. Last year, he was all the way down to 51. What that means is at 51 yards per game, he only played 16 games, but if he played 17 games, it means 850 yards. 850 rushing yards for a QB is a lot. It's a lot. Josh Allen has never had 850 rushing yards. He's never been anywhere close to that, I don't think. He had 760 twice. Those are his highs. He's had some 500s. He's had a 600. That's Josh Allen's rushing totals, right? I guess we can look at yards per game for him too. Yards per game. As a rookie, he was at 52. But then it's been 31, 26, 44, 47, 30. The real high end was approaching 50 at 47. Jalen Hurts, nowhere close. Jalen Hurts does a lot of the QB sneaks and scores a lot of TDs. And he's an efficient scrambler. Sorry, there's so many of these tables on this window. It's always hard to find. Jalen Hurts actually does have a 784-yard season in his second season with 15 games, 52 yards per game. So me, definitively saying nowhere close is not actually that accurate. 52 yards per game as a second-year player. But you see how for all these players, it actually does kind of fall as they get older. Like Lamar was at 80 in his second season. So Hurts was at 50. Then he was at 35 last year. Played a little bit hurt last year. Maybe I did overstate that Hurts was nowhere close. He's more of a 750 kind of guy. Close to 800. But so I'm saying Lamar, even last year on his yards per game, was at 850, but that was the low end clearly for him. Like Lamar can run for 1,000 plus any season. And I think with Derrick Henry, he might. Like, it's not that hard. I'm trying to think of other guys like Kyler Murray, where like his yards per game, his peak season was the second year, 51 yards per game rushing, had 819. Other seasons of his career between 30 and 40 rush yards is all, sub 40 yards per game as a rusher. Justin Fields would have been one that actually would have been above 50 yards per game for sure. But the point I'm driving home, so he had a 76 yards per game in his sophomore season, second season. Still not as good as Lamar's, second season, but really good. And then last year he was at 50, back down to 50. That's Lamar's like low end, but Lamar has multiple seasons at 60. Like, let's go back to Lamar again. Now that I've shown you like the range, some of these guys can hit 50 yards per game as a quarterback running. Lamar has had 4 seasons at 63 plus, and then last year was down at 51. There's another 10 yards per game, which is, 200 yards for the season. The ability to get to the 1,000 yards and all of that, and then you mix in this pass rate bump. Because the biggest thing I've been talking about, like Anthony Richardson, is like, even if you're mobile, you need some passing stats. When Lamar won MVP the first time and broke fantasy football, he led the league with 36 pass TDs, right? And threw for 3,127 yards. He hasn't had those kinds of pass TDs again. Last year was his his only other season over 3,000 pass yards. But if we're starting to talk about Lamar getting over 4,000 pass yards, potentially pushing 30 touchdowns again, passing, in addition to potentially running for 800 plus, that's where I get him as the pretty. Like, I was about to push him over Hurts, actually, because I'm a little concerned about the Hurts rush TDs, but I mean, I didn't do that because I was like, I don't really need to. The market's not doing that, and I'm not like, I don't want to make some bold statement on the tush push not working anymore without Jason Kelce. But I'm more concerned about it than some of my like close friends. Like Sean kind of pokes fun at that as a possibility. Like, yeah, like they're gonna go away from the tush push, and I'm like, I mean, I kind of think they are. Don't laugh at me. Not go away from it, but I think they might actually like not be quite as good. I think Jason Kelce probably did matter to that, you know? So anyway, we got us sold in the chat. You guys are, the 9% TDs that year was incredible. 2019 Lamar was so fun. Yeah, I mean, this is like, I'm not saying Bateman's going to crush, but like, this is mildly possible. I think the offense was more wide receiver focused last year than it's ever been in the Lamar era, because the Roman offense was always so tight end focused. But like the ways that like Odell would rotate in and be limited routes, but have a high targets per route run, a lot of air yards, a very vertical element. Obviously the Zay Flowers stuff that progressed throughout the year, like the playoff game was all Zay Flowers until, I mean, that fumble was such a bummer, but he was, like, I mean, obviously Andrews was coming back from an injury and was very like compromised in the playoffs. But Isaiah Likely's targets per out run fell by even more than Andrews's fell by. I just thought that the offense was more like, they talked preseason spread, Louisville based offense. And when I think of those spread college offenses, I don't think of like Mark Andrews. I think of like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and like wide receivers attacking. It's a spread and speed offense on the outside. Now, Andrews is incredibly good and is going to be very good. But yeah, that's one of the other things that I think about with respect to like my Andrews ranking, which I feel like I'm constantly defending. But yeah, I don't think it's like his breakout season this year. He's coming back from an injury. Like, they don't have a need to push him super early. I don't think he's like going to be completely compromised from that injury, and I think he's going to be good, but the role was very different. We've talked about it on other streams. Pretty firm in my belief that Andrews is just going to be good, but not great. But I think if all that stuff that those guys are playing for Andrews is true, that Lamar is the way you win. Yeah, Artillery Frost. Zay was absolutely electric in that playoff game. Just made literal rookie mistakes. He's talking about the fumble and the unsportsmanlike conduct. Pepper Tony saying it was a weak penalty call. I vaguely remember that. I think I didn't like the penalty call either. I can't remember exactly. Maybe I was one that was saying that it was a fair penalty call, even though other people were saying it was weak. I can't remember. I remember there's a little bit of a debate on whether it was valid. Anyway, let's get back to these. We got Bijan in this one. Man, Gibbs slides to 18 here. I mean, I doubt I have a Bijan Gibbs in my profile. I definitely don't have a lot of RBRBs in my profile. I really do like Bijan Olave and Bijan Waddle, but I got versions of those teams, man. I got multiple versions of those teams. Let's fuck around and make an RB team. Let's fuck around and do that. Yeah, Stutzman's with me. Smash Gibbs. Let's figure it out. I guess I do need one. I feel really good about Jane Daniels this year. Really good. I appreciate this, Steph. It was a good. I assume that was about our long Mark Andrews Ravens conversation, which I think Yeah, Steph's in the Discord channel as well, where it was occurring. So private Discord channel, but she was following along. It sounds like it was a fun, Steel Man. You're testing your takes against other people who are testing their takes, and we all, respect each other's work, but come to different conclusions for different reasons, which is part of why it becomes a little bit difficult to parse why we're missing. Speaking of Zay Flowers, top of the queue here on a Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs start. Definitely would love to go wide receiver here. I'll let you guys in on a little secret that I had T. Higgins ahead of Zay Flowers and Tank Dell in these rankings. And then I realized that every single one of these drafts that comes in the third round, I'm going to have Higgins at the top of the queue. I updated that today. I think Higgins should go ahead of Zay. The reason I updated is this exact situation. I have Garrett on a week 12 bye, and there's a lot of those. It's Garrett, it's London. I'm always like, one of my round 1-2 turn guys has a week 12 bye, right? Olave. And then I probably want to try to get them both. I want to try to get Higgins on the way back, right? If I go by ADP, it's actually Derrick Henry here. But I definitely prefer the receivers here. Now, Laporta's intriguing with Gibbs. And if I go receiver here, I am like, I'm really hoping that Pitts comes back in the 5th. I got to take at least one receiver here. I'm going to take Flowers. If Higgins goes, I'm going to get plenty of Higgins. If Higgins goes, I'll be looking at this tight end tier, or I might be looking at, Rashee Rice or bringing up another receiver. But there's a pretty huge teardrop at receiver here for me. I hope that Higgins makes it back here. I would like to get the third receiver here and then push tight end. If it's Kittle, it's Kittle. If it's a late round tight end build, I'm okay with doing a few late round tight end builds. I'm a little too extreme on the elite tight end stuff. Here's a Bijan. I have so many Bijan and Olave, and I know because every time I notice they have the same buy, and it's not a big deal when it's a running back and a receiver, but it does impact your flex a little bit, right? Like if I need my depth receivers to fill Olave at the top of my receiver group, and I also need my depth running backs to fill Bijan at the top of my running back group, then it is impacting my lineup still. But it's Olave is such a clear pick here. The next two guys in my ranks are the running backs. Jonathan Taylor had fallen and would have been an arguable pick there, but I don't want another RB build. I don't think I need to go Bijan JT here the way that I just did with the Gibbs pick. I could have, but I don't love the structural side of it. I did it because it was Gibbs on the last one because it was unique. There's going to be plenty of Bijan JTs out there. And yeah, Olave to me, pretty clear receiver pick here over the other guys. Let's jump in another one where we have a McCaffrey start. We're at the 2-3. Olave comes all the way back. We are hammering that. And then it's the other question. I've been doing this one a lot with these early draft slots where I'm like, do I like Cooper Kupp here? He's just risen. This is new for me. Cooper Kupp at the 2-3 like this. An ADP in the second round. I was taking him late third. And then maybe he was creeping up the last time my slows got through here. I was aware that he was like an early third pick. I was not aware that his ADP was 22. This is really pushed up. At the same time, like if Nakua, I'm concerned about Nakua. If Nakua's missing conditioning time and all that stuff, missing practice time, gets him off to a slow start, the timing's not right, and Kupp's cruising. Like if Kupp comes back healthy this year, he's going to be their primary number one guy in the first game. Like Nakua was last year when Kupp was out and got 20 targets in week 1 and then 15 in week 2. Got 35 targets in the first 2 games. I don't think that's going to happen for Kupp, but Kupp could come right out of the gate and have a 10-catch game in week 1. And then you're like, all right, well, who would you rather have, Kupp or Nakua at that point? You really think Nakua is going to get healthy and get up to speed and take the job back from Kupp at that point? You start to get the inertia element. I was trying to think of the word inertia. I'm going to take Kupp. I think I feel pretty comfortable with him as the top receiver at that point. So that's a CMC Olave Kupp start that I really like. I'm sure Olave and Kupp are paired together with Olave going higher in the second a lot and Kupp later in the third, but none of those teams have CMC on them. It's a pretty unique start. Oh my God. I'm not sharing the screen. How are you guys still hanging out here? Oh my God. Can't see. Oh my God. I've been doing this for 6 minutes. Smash Gibbs was the last time I looked down here. I pulled up Sean's comments. Change screen, question mark. Can't see drafts. I'm going to put every single one of these comments up here because you guys tried. You really did. Can't see your screen. Change scene. Oh, please tell me the quick side note. Ben Harvard in the chat says new Dennis Allen quote on Kendre Miller Beggs being dead. I'm going to need that. I'm going to need that quote because I got a lot of Kendre Miller Beggs. We got a shush. Don't tell him. At least Gretch is an amazing audio streamer. Audio listeners don't know we're exactly the same right now. Audio listeners are feasting right now. Nobody let him know. It's our little secret. He's got no idea. Love who he has in queue. Wow, Team 5 looks stacked. His queue is strong. Show screen. Somebody popped it. That queue is awful, man. No way I'm a lave there. Wow, what a reach by Team 7. You guys, all right, I got to stop at this point. Okay, Team 6 or 7 for show. Team 9 is fire. Then we got the Gretch realize finally. There it is. Whittington is the guy you need. Whittington could be anything, even Puka. The Whittington is the guy you need thing is, I love Pete. He wrote him up in the Fantasy Life newsletter today. Just, I can't. I did the Silva, like you're Josh and Whittington to the people. I mean, I understand that Puka did it last year, but I don't know, man. Look, it's valuable. It's a valuable role. That's why I'm saying the cup stuff. No, he figures it out. You guys loved it. You guys loved it. I appreciate that. That was the chair. The chair. At least I didn't give you the chair. You did. You did watch a chair for 10 minutes and didn't leave. I don't know why. Oh man. You never get this kind of content in a fast draft stream. Too much going on. All right. So this was a draft. I'll go to it. This was the room I was looking at. It had Devonta, DK Metcalf, Diggs, Ayuk, all these guys available. It's the CMC Olave Cup. But I mean, there were several other picks I made that are now, they're just buried. So whatever happened. All right. BBM. We got a Wilson London start. So I went with 2 week 12s to start. This is where you really have to question the T. Higgins pick at the 3-4. But we can go Diggs. Nice and easy pick there to grab Diggs. He, to me, still belongs a tier above Tank Dell. And on Underdog right now, they're basically going back to back. So I'm getting a lot more Diggs than Tank. Hopefully that pans out. Got to stick by your analysis on some stuff, right? I got Jefferson and Waddle. Here, I'm in the 3rd. I got Bullock right behind me. Bullock, you're in the chat. Tell me who you want so I can take him. This is pretty funny. Tiger Uppercut wants to let us know that he laughs his ass off every time he sees Stealing Banana Shorts on his podcast stream, and it's an hour long. It's so funny because we've tried to do so many different things. We go long. That's the issue, right? But like there's an incentive to have more shows from, the ad element and all the other stuff. Like not to, break the third wall too much, but there's an incentive to have more shows. And so like we've always done these really long shows and then we have to record more. And then it's like we're like for a long time we're recording multiple days a week for years. And then doing like hour and a half shows and talking before and after, and it's like we're spending our whole day together, which is great. We love talking to each other. But, I was finally this year, I was like, I mean, what, like he used to want to do, Sean wanted to try to do 3 shows like back to back to back. I had a hard time with it when we're trying to break it up. It's different when it's one long conversation. It's harder when you're trying to like do 3 different like topics and like try to make these like perfectly like concise shows. I don't know. So we finally in this year, this offseason, we're like, look, what if we try to do this thing where we just hang out one day, set aside a day to do a long show because we like to do long shows, record a long show and break it up into small shows. And then there we go. But like, let's not break it up beforehand. Like, let's let it be the, free flowing thing that is a lot easier to do. But then we're like, okay, well, we'll also, post the full audio. And like, that was like the way that it'll go is the way that it is. And then you're right. Like, we just do 3 1-hour shows. The idea was like we would do an hour and a half and 3 30-minute shows, basically. We just do 3 1-hour shows. It's crazy. Six hours should be the shorts. All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this is difficult for some of you guys. You get 1 or 2 of the shorts, and then the full podcast becomes a problem. We knew that would be a little bit of a problem, but we also were like, the alternative is not posting the full audio, and we knew people would want the full audio, and so we're basically just like, we'll post more. And again, there's like a little bit of an incentive to more shows, so the fact that it's a little bit repetitive is actually, it's not intentional. It's more like, what's intentional is to try to record a long thing and break it up. And they're like, okay, well, we'll post the full audio too because people will want that. But then it's going to create some of this problem. But also, when people like you listen to the shorts and the full audio, it actually it helps us quite a bit. So that's cool. Yeah, this is a Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle. We could go Devonta. We could go Devonta. We could go Metcalf. I'm trying to get a little bit more Metcalf because I don't usually take a lot of him, but I do kind of think the Seattle offense, I've talked about it recently, is one that could be really fun. I have him in the same tier in my redraft rankings along with Diggs. Let's make this a Metcalf team. Jefferson, Waddle, Metcalf's a pretty fun start. Haven't been doing enough Metcalf. Trying to get a little bit of balance in some of these late drafts. All right, another McCaffrey, and then we're at the 1-2. As I say that, I'm going to be kind of forced into another Metcalf share. It looks like. I guess I could go Devonta, and I could do an Achane. I just did a McCaffrey Achane. I like it, but I'm not like trying to do a bunch of robust builds, especially as the wide receivers that I really liked in the 7th round are not in the 7th round anymore. And I think the wide receiver windows, maybe it's loosening up, but I mean, so can you get, I guess at 8-9, maybe you can get like Addison or DeAndre Hopkins. Can you guys get like Addison, DeAndre Hopkins at the like 8-9? Is that like a wide receiver range from the early draft slots now, or does it end at 7? Because I'm always taking a tight end. So if I'm kind of trying to think through if Achane Kyron would be a possibility here. What if I went 3 running backs and went hyper fragile? Matched their buys. Sean saying Addison falls to 8 pretty often. Late 8 will be thin. Mr. Mister saying you can get him at 8-9. I mean, a McCaffrey, Achane, Kyron is kind of fun. I think I like Metcalf over Devonta Smith, man. Sean loves Devonta Smith. He's always in my ear about Devonta Smith, Siegel. But, I mean, he's just been a lot worse than A.J. Brown every year. Like, I feel like Josh is in every chat. I feel like I recognize this. He's the one that's always like, do the thing that your worst impulse. Like, I'm pretty sure you're the one that wanted me to take Kittle that one time as my 3rd tight end. I mean, there was somebody in the chat that was like, I bet you won't. It feels like it was Josh. Be a man. Do it. Part of the reason I don't want to do this. Okay. All right. Sorry, Josh. Part of the reason that I don't want to do this is I don't want to feel like I can't take a tight end. I always want to take tight ends. I don't think it's optimal to put myself in a position like I'm going to just take one of them. I'm going to do the half measure. I'm going to go Achane, and then I'm going to go DK Metcalf again because I am trying to get more DK Metcalf. Sorry to disappoint you guys. Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave. Here, I'll take Kyron on this team. There's your early running back pick. Yes, Zealots. All right. Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Diggs. We swing back around. See, now I got Zay versus Higgins head to head. And I have one player of each buy already. I also could grab Laporta here with the Gibbs thing. Where's this Pitts still like he's at 60 still. I want to get more Pitts. I want to do so. The problem is I always take a tight end in this range on these late round, these late draft slots, and I'm not getting enough Pitts in my profile at the 5-6 because I mean I've taken him some in the earlier fifth, but I'm not getting him at the 5-6 where he's actually like a good value because I've already taken a tight end. The spots where I get Pitts are the ones where I go two elite tight ends. I take Laporta plus Pitts, or McBride plus Pitts sometimes. I kind of want to go get Pitts here, and the guy I really want to get more access to right now is T. Higgins. So we're going to do T. Higgins. This is going to be Garrett Wilson, Gibbs, Diggs, T, and, I'm just going to put Pitts in the queue. We got Bullock at 410. And then coming back at 5-3, he's watching right now, taking notes. Bullock, if you take Pitts at 503, I'm blocking your account on stealing signals. I think that's like that's probably against the rules. Like I probably can't say that. You can do whatever you want on your team. I probably can't like extort people to make picks that I want them to make in my drafts. That's not extortion. All right. AJ Brown, Nico Collins. We're in the late third. Stefon Diggs makes it back to 309. I have Nico. I could build out a Texans thing with AJ Brown, Nico, and Diggs. Yeah, I guess the other thing is, do I want Jalen Hurts? Because this is the AJ Brown team. Because if I go Diggs, I'm setting up a Stroud pick, but the AJ Brown pick already kind of set up, a Hurts thing. That's sort of the point of taking AJ Brown, right? Even if you're not like super high on him, you're taking him to set up the Hurts thing. So then I end up with like, how does Stroud even fall? He's at 70, so I would have to take him in the 6th round. I've seen him go in the 80s, but I probably can't get him at 81, but I guess it's more likely if I have Nico and Diggs. What I'm thinking there is if I took Diggs and then I still took Hurts, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing a Hurts Stroud build, 2 QB build with 2 studs. If I got Stroud at the end of 7 at 81. So I still got 4 receivers in the first 6. I'd probably get a tight end with it. And then my 7th round pick would be my QB2. Through 7, I would be a 2-0-4-1 build. I think I could land that plane, and it would be kind of sick. And it'd be a lot of QB draft capital, but you guys are saying it's good to have stacks without the QB. Correlation without the QB is def fair game. I don't love it with the early ADPs. Why so bullish on Diggs? I've done this a ton, but like he earns a lot of volume every year of his career. Has done nothing but earn a lot of volume. I think people are going to Like, he's a legitimate, like, alpha receiver and has continued to be one. I'm going to take him. I think you guys are right. I had been saying earlier that, like, earlier in draft season, if you took both Nico and Diggs, you probably wanted that to be a Stroud team. But that was when you were taking them at the 2-3 turn together. I think it's a little different when you take Diggs late 3. No, I mean, because I agree with Pete's point, but I think that's more true in situations where you're getting like a little bit like more of an ADP discount. And you're like, okay, these things are correlated and working together. Like last night, we took Luke Musgrave on our main event on a team that already had Dontavian Wicks. Like, okay, we've made a bet on the Packers passing situation being positive for Wicks. We've also made a bet against the highest priced Packers, Jaden Reed and Christian Watson being like the centerpieces. And that's what we did when we took Dontavian Wicks. Well, that same bet works really well with Luke Musgrave without needing Jordan Love. If that's right, and Jordan Love's a stud, and let's say one of Reed or Watson is hurt or busting or not good, then those things are moving in the same direction. That's also true here, but the one here is like when I put a second-round pick and a third-round pick on the same team from the same offense, and I'm saying they're both going to hit value at those prices, then I'm saying CJ Stroud's the quarterback you need. Like I'm saying this is a very clear, like we're building a lot of momentum in this direction. Why was the Wicks pick wild? Was it too early? Somebody said that last night too. Sean is another one of those guys from the FF Go Bills, 2-time FFPC champs. He thinks it was way too early on Dontavian Wicks. Little does he know that Wicks was clearly the best player in my ranks at that time. I'm pretty high on Dontavian Wicks, guys. Full round ahead of his early spot. I didn't realize we were that early. I mean, we were on a turn. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to push him to the next turn? Let somebody else take Dontavian Wicks when you definitely need a receiver? Sean's doing this thing where he's like, could have just waited and still got him. I mean, that's logic. Those are facts and logic. We don't like any of that around here. All right. CeeDee Lamb. We're in the late second. I mean, it's clearly Achane by ADP. I'm trying to get more Achane. A Lamb Achane starts fun. I don't think I have one of those, at least in this batch. I'm sure I have it somewhere else in the portfolio. We'll go Lamb Achane. This one is a Jefferson Nico, and then you're sitting on Diggs again. I'm trying to take some DJ Moore in case I'm just horribly wrong on that. So whatever. We'll take DJ Moore on this one. He's the ADP pick. Never do it. I'll let myself do it there. I think that was a schnauzer. Good time to take DJ Moore. Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel. We are in the late third here. It's always Diggs. Why? So somebody asked, what do I think about Diggs? My question is, what happened to Diggs to fall? I mean, this type of thing I actually think about. First year on new team, Diggs always kills it. Diggs, a one-year deal, playing for a contract. Like, I actually think Diggs, like, the whole thing, everyone's like, oh, Diggs is a cancer. He's going to blow this team up. Like, no, dude, Diggs going to be on his best behavior. Diggs is, like, not stupid. He's just, like, he's a certain personality. He's, I mean, clearly some people don't understand him. I feel like I have a very clear understanding of who Stefon Diggs is, and I don't think he's, like, definitely not going to be a problem this year, but you can be a problem to a certain degree and get away with it when you're, a high-priced wide receiver and whatever, and you're as established he is, and he'll do that. He'll have some antics. But when push comes to shove, when it's like, hey, it's become so much of a problem, you need to stop. Like, there's some guys that continue to do it right until they get themselves, like, thrown off the team. Like, even Antonio Brown, like, was doing it on even on a Tom Brady team where there's clear leadership. He did it so much that he got kicked off the team. That's the line at which Diggs will come out and be like, yo, my bad. Like, he's not going to get himself like into trouble. It's just not, it would surprise me. I'm not saying it can't happen, because who knows? Like, he is a little bit volatile, but this idea that like, I mean, I think he's going to be super locked in. I think he's going to have a really, really good year with a quarterback who elevated everyone else's efficiency in the offense last year, including like how much Stroud elevated Nico and Tank is still up for debate. Diggs has been a superstar for a long, long time. Better in the last like 6 or 7 years than than each of the first 2 years of Nico's career, right? Then Nico had the incredible year 3. I am taking Nico meaningfully ahead of Diggs, but there's a big percentage of the outcomes where Diggs is just better than Nico this year without like Nico getting banged up or anything. It's just like Diggs is is earning way more volume than Nico. And everyone else is just like, Diggs is done. He's old. He can't play anymore. And I mean, he faded down the stretch last year. That's the situation where he wasn't like trying as much. The offense was going a different direction, what have you. And I mean, he still had 160 targets last year and like was still fine. I can't remember what I was going to look up. I clicked on his name. 100 plus catches 4 seasons in a row. Like, what is there not to like? I was gonna compare, I guess, his background to Nico's. I was gonna go to my yards per out run thing and take a peek at. You know, you look at his peripherals against Nico, and you look at even when he was a young player against Nico, and Diggs was good right away. You know, it took Nico until second season to develop some decent peripherals, and then into his third season, he really breaks out. I think Nico's really, really good, man. I really do. And I think, you know, I don't think Stroud's the one who elevated him. Tank's peripherals aren't, I mean, they're not even close to Nico's on a per route basis. And they're not close to Diggs, who's done it like so many times. Now, Tank is a highly efficient year 2 receiver that we should expect to take a step forward in year 2 and be very good. He's also undersized and pretty clearly going to, in my mind, be the guy that kind of comes off the field 2 receiver sets and is the other dude, where like Diggs and Nico are your traditional starting wide receivers, right? And then Tank is operating, and Tank's going to be so efficient in that role, though. Like, that's why I like him. And then if either Nico or Diggs misses time, there's a ton of contingent upside. I'm still all in on Tank, but this idea that Tank should go ahead of Diggs when Diggs is going to run routes on almost every drop back and Tank's going to come off the field in 2 receiver sets, he's going to be that much more efficient, as if like Diggs isn't going to earn a bunch of volume and be really good too. And again, like Diggs isn't old. Like, he's not hyper young, but he has not shown any sign of decline, and he's been really good his whole career, and he turns 31 at the end of November. He's 30 right now. I don't know, man. Really good receivers don't just like fall off the second they turn 30. Like, that's not a thing. So anyway, this is absolutely true. Undersized is becoming increasingly less important in the modern NFL, especially if you're good. Yes, absolutely true. Not any sign of decline. I mean, all right. Is this one of the ones where like there's like routes based stuff, like you got open score stuff, or maybe like Harmon's reception perception doesn't love him? I don't know, but this is what I'm looking at. This is my, you know, targets per out run data stuff that I like to dig into. This is Diggs I'm trying to get this centered. Diggs' whole career goes back to 2015. As a rookie, he had a 1.8 yards per out run, earned volume, solid targets per out run for a rookie, immediately is efficient, 9.4 yards per target, builds that up to 23% target per out run in his second year. Weighted targets per out run start in the 0.5 and above range, which is great. This is his last year in Minnesota. He's amazing. Weighted targets per out run gets over 0.6. 4 years in Buffalo, the weighted targets per out run, show me where he fell off. Show me where the targets per out run fell off. This is the same target earning profile. The only thing that fell off was the yards per target. There's some inconsistency with the catch rate in year 2. I wrote last year it was less about the catch rate. It was a little bit more about the yards per reception, a little bit less explosive. There is some fall off on the efficiency side, but a big part of this yards per target decline goes back to the ADOT decline, the stuff that happened in the second half of the season, and it's still a 1.99 yards per route run, and the year prior was 2.4, and he has been up and down like this. Like, I'm not saying he's definitely going to rebound back to 2.5 yards per route run, but I'm more concerned about this and the situation this year. And like this type of target earning vis-a-vis Nico was a 16.3 guy in year 1, 0.43 weighted targets per out run, built up a little bit in the second season. Now was playing with bad players and had bad efficiency as well. And then last year, the targets per out run take a big step forward to 26. Yards per target jumps really high. Yards per out run skyrockets to 3.1, better than any season in Diggs' career, better than most great receivers' best season, 3.1 yards per out run. Incredible year. He's very, very good. Hyper efficient on big volume. The thing about the big volume that I wrote from the beginning of the offseason was that you had this dude running a bunch of routes last year. 417 routes for Robert Woods. Couldn't earn a volume if it hit him in the face. 1.02 yards per route run, right? After Tank Dell went down, you had Noah Brown. Noah Brown is a guy who, way back here, he only ran 24 and 43 routes in these early seasons, so don't really look at these targets per out run. Every time he's run over 100 routes has been in the 15 to 17 targets per out run range. He gets 293 routes last year. He gets all the way up to 18.4. Hadn't did anything like that the last couple years. Gets his yards per target up to a career high, 1.94 yards per out run for a guy who otherwise had never been over 1.25 other than this 24 route sample in 2018 that I'm obviously not paying attention to. 1.94 yards per out run is really, really good. All these other numbers are like what you would think Noah Brown's other numbers would look like. That's because there was no other target competition. Like somebody had to do it, and Stroud was elevating. He was finding guys in space and hitting them with passes that they couldn't not catch, and then they could run. Like, Tank Dell, very great rookie year, 23.1 at a 14.4 ADOT. This 0.66 weighted targets per out run is right there with Diggs' numbers. It's great. Great yards per target, 2.22 yards per out run. This is all great. Does this stick when you have Stefon Diggs instead of Robert Woods in the offense? Does the 23.1 stick? Does the 26.0% stick for Nico? And then you guys are like, that everyone thinks that's all going to stick. And then this stuff that Stefon Diggs has done every year of his career is just going to crater down to Robert Woods level. That's what people are like projecting. That Stefon Diggs is going to be Robert Woods. He's going to get 16% targets per out this year. Doesn't make any sense. It has to come from Nico and Tank to some degree. It's also why I'm out on Dalton Schultz, who is the one guy who like managed to not actually elevate. He was basically the same dude he had been the last 2 years in Dallas. Ran a lot of routes. He's like, in this like just under 1.5 yards per out run range. The targets per out runs right between his previous 2 seasons. The yards per target's right in that range. I think he loses volume this year because I don't think he's probably that great. The other 3 receivers are all really good. This isn't what I said. You said, I think this is a straw man. He doesn't have to be Robert Woods to not pay off ADP 33. The way that people are drafting Tank Dell over Stefon Diggs, which would mean that Tank Dell is growing from last year's role into year 2, or at least repeating the targets per out. When I was saying the Robert Woods thing, it's people think he's going to be Robert Woods. What I meant by that is in relation to like being willing to take Tank Dell like right at the same spot as Stefon Diggs. Because the question, when I was asking, like, why am I so sure about Stefon Diggs? I've been taking him over Tank Dell. They're going back to back. I keep taking him over Tank Dell. I think it's very much a Tank Dell question as well. So anyway, I mean, I hear this point as it relates to Diggs. I meant it as it relates to Tank Dell. I mean, yeah, you can say that like he's not going to be Robert Woods, but Tank Dell's still going to be. I mean, I don't know. It's not take targets from Nico and Tank either. It's a whole different offense, man. Like, I think they're going to throw a ton more. Like, so this is the way that I would think about it. This guy's asking, do you, or gal is asking, do you think it's possible for all three receivers to hit their ADP expectations? I feel like there's going to be an odd man out, or they'll all be slightly disappointing at ADP. I think that's, I think that's like, I think it's possible because I think Stroud throwing for 5,000 yards is possible. I also think that the way that it plays out is different throughout the season. Like, think about how Tank was really good for half of the season, then missed the second half of the year. He was still like a pretty good win rate player last year, or at least advance rate player. Like, if that type of thing occurs for somebody within the offense, they can be good for a large stretch and really help builds, and then also potentially miss time. And there can be contingent value for other guys in the offense. Like, it's not, I mean, one of the things with these types of situations where you're like, Stroud's going to elevate the receivers is I want contingent value to be like in my valuations as well. Like, what if Tank gets hurt again? Like, oh, you're just saying that because he's small. But like, I mean, he is small. What if he gets hurt again? Then you definitely want Diggs in the third round, man. Diggs is like that target earning, those weighted targets per out run, that consistency is like, that's like top 5, top 10 shit in the league. And he's doing it every season for 5 straight years. And people are just like, he's not going to do it anymore. And I don't think he's going to step right in, to be clear. I don't think he's going to step right in and do the same level of target earning. But I do think you're doing, like, a lot of people are doing some mental gymnastics with Diggs where they're like, he's just going to be a completely worse version of himself. I know it's a new offense. I know there's a lot of reasons that he should fall off. Yeah, I mean, that's the point I'm making, Roheen. Like, everything you're saying, I'm saying is a straw man. You're throwing at the other straw man back. I'm just going to stop doing your comments. I am making you the center point of the show again. But like you're giving me the same straw man back that I'm giving you. Like, you're not proving anything. Like, you're just trying to disprove my arguments. Like, what's the take then? Somebody tell me why Diggs doesn't hit. Why should the default be that he's going to be bad? Just like it's literally just because what we saw in Houston last year, and nobody's thinking about the 2024 Houston Texans and how Stefon Diggs being on the field changes things. That's why I'm saying, like, he's not just going to be Robert Woods, because it's not just Stroud and Nico and Diggs. I mean, Stroud and Nico and Tank, and then it's Stefon Diggs, man. Like, this is like a good player. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. He's a really good long-term, high-end, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, going into an incredible passing situation. These are two young players that both, for Nico, it was a breakout season. He had not been a 2.0 yards per out run guy prior. And Tank did it for the first time because he was a rookie, but both did it for the first time. And like, the idea that Stefon Diggs, I understand he's old and there are age-related risks, but the idea that he is going to fail stepping into an incredible passing situation, like, when you look at his profile, everyone is bag defending, not necessarily bag defending, but like, it's this like, Nico and Tank are darlings, and so we have to defend them first and then try to figure out Diggs. Like, give yourself the pro Stefon Diggs argument instead of the straw man thing. Like, steel man why Stefon Diggs sucks. Tell yourself, okay, Stefon Diggs, what is he? I just showed you a lot of the stats. A lot of you guys are saying he struggled down the stretch. He dropped the pass against KC. Very flimsy, right? Like, there is some stuff that he wasn't great down the stretch. We have a long-term stuff. He's disgruntled. His brother's tweeting during the season. But we have a long-term element to his data that's really strong. His volume continued to be really strong, right? They kept throwing him the ball. They thought he was still good, even though he was disgruntled. there's been a lot of disgruntled players in the NFL, man. Like him being a little bit inefficient and dropping a couple passes and maybe not trying as hard down the stretch doesn't mean that he sucks now. He was still getting open. He was still drawing volume. And then, essentially forces his way out of town. And I understand that like people are not cool on the off-field stuff. But like other than the off-field stuff with Diggs, give me a reasonable evidence-based argument when you're viewing it from Stefon Diggs' lens that he's going to step into the CJ Stroud situation that elevated Noah Brown and everyone else last year with two young players that just had career years for the first time. And they might be long-term stars, but either of them could be a little bit worse this year than last year or not the long-term player. We've seen one of the things that I talk about is the long view, and I get really frustrated when I feel like people only watched football in 2023. And I'm not saying, because I also think you do need to predict young players early. You don't have to see it first to believe it. I always say that too. So I'm not saying you can't predict Nico and Tank to be great. But it's relevant that Diggs has been a high-level, elite, volume-earning stud alpha receiver for so many years, and Nico and Tank just did it. Like Tank was a day 3 rookie, was very impressive. Didn't even play a full season. We didn't get a full season of data at those numbers I shared. Nico missed some time too. Like from Diggs's perspective, not necessarily trying to knock those guys because I do really like Nico and Tank, but from Diggs's perspective, what is the argument that this really good long-term player, other than some pretty flimsy stuff about late season, is going to step in with CJ Stroud and like be a second fiddle or not be relevant to the passing game? It's again, this gets back to the personality stuff. If he does get second fiddle and he starts throwing a fit, they're going to cater to him. Like part of the reason that I think they traded a second round pick for him. Part of the reason I think this is because Diggs' personality is sort of so annoying that they're going to make plays for him. Make sure that he gets some stuff so he'll shut the hell up. That's what other teams have done with Stefon Diggs. I can't visualize, I'm being honest, I can't visualize the scenario, and I'm trying to understand it. I haven't been reading the chat, so you guys maybe have given me some great examples. But I'm trying to visualize the scenario where this player, other than the little bits of stuff at the end of last year, was a precursor for him being wildly worse this year. Can't earn volume anymore and all that stuff. Other than that outcome, because that's possible. I'll acknowledge that's possible, but I've made it clear that I believe that that's an overstated him. He's going over the age curve. Did you guys see his workout videos this offseason and stuff? Again, Stefon Diggs' mentality, he's ready to prove somebody wrong. Dude's probably never been more locked in. Greatest shape of your life stuff doesn't matter, but I do think motivation and stuff like that is somewhat relevant. This idea that he's going to definitely go over an age curve, I want you guys to steel man that take. That's what I feel comfortable with my Diggs bags. I'm trying to ask you guys to ask yourself why you think a player as good as Stefon Diggs has been, as much volume as he's earned, is going to step into what CJ Stroud did last year and what we think this passing game can do this year and not do anything because two young players who broke out last year, they've shown us one season of data, and then neither of them has shown us a full season of routes. About 2/3 of a season on Nico's case, about a half a season on Tank's. Those two guys are going to be so good and so dynamic that Diggs is going to clearly be a second fiddle player. And then also when he's not happy about it, the team's not going to be, they're going to be like, look, these guys are just so much better than you. And we gave up a second round pick for you, but we don't need you. They're going to eventually cut him or something. Seems to be the opinion. I've seen people say that he's such a cancer and all this. I think it's really, really hard to explain to me how Stefon Diggs in the CJ Stroud offense, Pat wrote a really great piece on Rico Dowdle today, and part of it was about how we know the running back value in this offense exists because Zeke is going just as high as him. There's some evidence for you. The market knows this is valuable. The evidence of why Diggs going in the late third matters is the fact that Nico's going in the early second has continued to rise, and Tank continues to rise into the third. We know that the receivers in this offense matter. We know this passing game matters. We're really high on Stroud in the receiving volume and the receiving production, but the market is really confident in the last month or 2 months that it's Nico and it's Tank and it can't be Diggs. And Diggs is sliding a whole round from the 2-3 turn. He's going late 2 to like the 3-4 turn. While Tank creeps up, I see Tank go in the early 3rd. He's, again, going to come off in 2 wide receiver sets. He's the number 3 receiver on his own team. Goes ahead of Diggs. A lot of people say he should go ahead of Diggs. He can be more efficient than Diggs. He's going to have a hard time earning more volume than Diggs because he's going to run a lot fewer routes. It's just the way that it's going to go. So, like, the ways that the range of outcomes of production overlap, if he's running a lot fewer routes than Diggs, for him to even get close in targets, he has to earn a lot more per route than Diggs can possibly earn. And then to be way more productive, he's got to be a lot more efficient too. But then on the other sides of those, it's like, what if Tank takes a step back? What if Diggs actually maintains some of the per route stuff and he's running more routes than Tank? Now you get, like, which guy gaps the other guy? It's the dude that's running way more routes. That's why I say there's still a tier apart, even though I love Tank, and I do Tank. As soon as Diggs goes, because he's the last of a tier for me, I'm happy to take Tank with the next pick as part of the next tier and get some exposure to him. But you'd be hard-pressed to see me take Tank over Diggs. I just don't. It's a lot of faith in a pretty small sample of a half season on a day 3 rookie. Like, yes, efficient rookies are year 2 breakout bets. Blair Andrews has written that article. There's been great evidence on that. It's a good bet. Tank Dell is a year 2 bet in this passing game is a good bet, man. Anyway, I'm reading the chat. You guys have a lot of good stuff to say. I'm this is a good one. What do you mean? We just sat in the chat for 25 minutes trying to explain it to you. Yeah, I mean, hopefully he doesn't drop passes in the playoffs again. Like, if this all comes down to one drop pass in the playoffs, guys, come on. Is the pro Diggs argument the same for Keenan Allen? On some level, yes. Yes, on some level, yes. Really, really strong. I write about the long view, dude. Good players earn volume, man. Targets are earned. My issue with DJ Moore has been that his target competition isn't good his whole career. Cole Kmet was second on his team in targets last year. You know who was the last year he was in Carolina? Terrace Marshall was the second player in targets that year. Prior to that, it was Robbie Chosen for a couple years. Then it was Curtis Samuel. Then it was Devin Funchess. Those are the number 2 weapons he's had to compete with. And Robbie Chosen out-targeted him one of those years. And I like DJ Moore a lot. But dude's not had significant competition. Did have CMC in some of those offenses. But the number 3 receiver or tight end in a lot of those offenses, guys like Shi Smith and Jarius Wright. I love the dude. But his targets per route run, DJ Moore, have been in like the 21, 22% in some offenses that are like didn't have anyone else running routes. They had bumps running routes with him, and he couldn't earn volume to the like 25% range. Keenan Allen wakes up and did it as a freshman in college against an outproduced an upper class Marvin Jones, who went on to play a long career in the NFL. Sophomore year, he's crushed over senior year Marvin Jones at Cal. Then he came into the NFL his first year, matched Antonio Gates, 21-year-old rookie in the NFL. Right there, volume-wise, with I think Antonio Gates was over 30 at that point. I don't want to say peak Antonio Gates. Right there with him. And Keenan Allen's not had target competition at times as well, but he's been at 25, 26% targets per out run in those seasons. Earns volume. That long view stuff matters. DJ Moore's season last year was the best of his career, and that is awesome. I love the dude. But this idea that, like, it still wasn't even as good as I if I'm not mistaken, I think Keenan Allen had a better yards per out run than him last year, even though it was DJ Moore's best year of his career. Yeah. Keenan Allen had a 2.36 yards per out run last year. DJ Moore had a 2.31. It was Keenan Allen's best year since 2018. It was a really strong year for him too, but he's been consistently strong in the interim, and he's had multiple seasons over 2.5 in his prime when he was really good. Yes, he's aging. Yes, DJ Moore's still young. But yeah, on some level, this is the same point. One guy is a long-term volume winner, dude. You look at the targets per out run, that's the sticky stat. He's 23% to 27% every year. DJ Moore's gotten over that one time. Like, there's one guy that's going to earn more volume than the other, assuming health. No, this is not the TLDR. This is the TLDR for you guys who want to fade Diggs. His ADP is definitely too low. Yeah, I mean, your comment right before that was there's no guarantee he'll stay happy through the season. Some athletes are just big divas wherever they go, NFL and otherwise. I get it. Some of you guys just don't like Diggs, but you guys need to question that, man. This is the Cliff Notes. Diggs has a much better resume of target earning than anyone else in that offense. That's my position. Now, Nico had a really good year last year, but it was right there with Diggs' last 5 years. And he was doing it against, Robert Woods and Noah Brown running a lot of those routes. This isn't, I'm pretty sure this is backward. Andy wrote, I read Nico produced better when Tank was on the field. I haven't looked at the splits, but people would often throw at me when we were talking about Tank versus Nico prior to the Diggs trade that Tank was better than Nico when they were on the field together. And then when Tank went out is when Nico really broke out. I used that argument backwards. I was like, well, that means that Nico, like when he had no other help in the offense or anything, showed that he could be an alpha when he was on the field. Because one of the things about he doesn't have target competition is when you still earn volume, then you show that even when teams are game planning for you, you can still get open. That's the thing that DJ Moore didn't necessarily show all those times in Carolina. And Keenan Allen did every year. There's no target competition, but I'm earning it at an elite level. And Nico did that down the stretch last year in a really good way. Diggs did that year after year in Buffalo. He was the focal point of the passing game, man. He's been for years. Even when he was disgruntled, they knew they couldn't go anywhere else, and defenses knew they couldn't go anywhere else. And he got open every game, every down. The guy, nobody works harder than Stefon Diggs on the field. This is what leads to the massive target numbers. I've talked about this before when we were talking about some of the prospects. I was talking about Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. I don't care about the top 20% of your routes. I care about the bottom 20%. How hard are you working in the bottom 20%? Because that's where you get the real volume. Because you're a dude that works hard every down. Nobody worked harder than Jarvis Landry. Nobody liked Jarvis Landry in fantasy, but that guy earned a ton of volume because every snap he worked like it was his very best snap. That matters. Consistency matters at wide receiver. You don't always get the ball. You're not always in the progression, but if you're always open and when a play breaks down or something, they find you. You get those extra targets because you're still working in the play. Not every receiver does it. Stefon Diggs does it. He did it when he was the only show in town in Buffalo. He will scramble drill it for days and get open later in the whatever time to throw window. And maybe that won't translate as much. Maybe Stroud will get it out on time to Nico and Tank. I mean, maybe some things will change the exact. I mean, this is an important point. I'm not saying it's definitely going to be all Diggs. What I'm saying is people are pretending like Diggs is going to just take a back seat and doesn't really bring anything and also is going to be a prima donna. And they traded a second-round pick for him, dude. Guaranteed him $20 million this year. This is it. This is the other thing I think is true. People are bored with Diggs. Consistently boring pick. They want the next flashy thing. I don't think this is necessarily wrong, Peppertoni. Stroud loves Tank. Will favor him as a matter of psychology. I do think and I don't even think it's I think they jive. I think when you play football, you see other players that understand the game the same as you, and he knows where he's going to be, and he knows how he's going to, read defenses and when he's going to go in and out of his breaks. I do think there's a thing there with Stroud and Tank. They've talked about it from the very beginning at camp. Stroud does love throwing to him. If the bull case is 2023, Keenan, I get it. The take is Diggs is still good, but the ascending pieces ascend. Personally, also think Nico is a second coming of Julio. Promise you, Julio didn't have the first 2 years that Nico did. He did have bad quarterback play, but guys like Julio don't have those 2 years. That's one of the things on Nico. Like, I really like Nico, and I don't want to start bashing Nico either, but you have to reckon with what he did in his rookie and second season, man. Those weren't great seasons. They were very good. But that's why I say, like, how much did Stroud elevate those guys? Because that gets back to the question about Diggs. Is like, what if Stroud elevates Diggs? Anyway, I'm just kind of going through a ton of comments. I do know a lot of you guys are appreciating it. Steph said preach. Somebody else, Tiger Upcut, said all-timer rant. One of you said this host take has won a new subscriber. I mean, I appreciate you guys that, bear with me here. Any higher end guys I have cliff concerns is a good question. And Diggs is one. Evans is one. Came in the league at 21. Has been around for a really long time. Every year, like clockwork, 1,000 yards. That's why I took him a little bit ago. Like, one of the things is like it's not a curve, it's a cliff. That's why we're talking about this. Like, when's it going to fall off? I think Baker could regress, and I think you could see Evans kind of have a rough year. Adams, I have concerns for. And I mean, I've talked about him as a volume earner as well, but the efficiency really fell off for him last year. I still take some of him. Cooper Kupp, obviously, very, very obviously, has that risk. One of the things is talent does win out at receiver. Like, I do, I want to avoid older receivers where we started to see the drop-offs and the targets per out run and stuff. Like, the reason I was out on Adam Thielen last year, even though Adam Thielen did great, was his numbers started to fall off. Like, and so the talent's going, when the talent's still there, it's still there. I'm trying to look through, like, I mean, Brandon Cooks. Scroll down kind of far there. Brandon Cooks is a good example of this year's Adam Thielen, where I'll probably be wrong and he'll get some targets, but the volume has really fallen off for him. Diggs, I mean, maybe the cliff comes, but again, he's not as old as people think he is. There's not a lot that suggests it would come. He could get hurt. Anyone could get hurt. He's 30. He's not 32. He'll turn 31 later in the season. Fell off a little bit last year. But they did, like, I think the offense switch and the ways that he fell off late last year could be, I mean, super contextual. Super, like, you can explain that away by saying he just wasn't as engaged in the new offense. Like, you guys are all talking about him being a prima donna. Like, it wasn't, he wasn't the focal point anymore for the first time in 4 years. Saw the writing on the wall. Got shipped out in the offseason. I don't know. Like, that's part of the thing with Devontae Adams, too, is like, you watch that show Receiver, which I didn't, but I've heard this, that apparently he really hated Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, well, probably impacted his efficiency. The premier Diggs bag defending stream. Me and my 26% are here for it. The thing is, I was making these arguments. I don't like the arguments that hyperfixate on small splits on just points per game as opposed to other peripherals. Oh, you don't mind the splits if it's more advanced. I got you. He didn't get outproduced by Khalil Shakir in the final 10 games. This is just made up. How is this true? I mean, I don't know where your cutoff is, but Khalil Shakir had multiple one catch games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like 10's a perfect cutoff to make him look great. 31 catches, 3.1 per game. You're telling me Diggs had fewer than 3.1 catches per game in the final 10 games? Like Shakir had some efficiency, made some big plays in a very hyper-specific split that you're looking at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In Diggs' final 10 games, he caught 5.2 balls per game. Substantially more. I guess it's just the end of the season last year. I mean, that's the thing that you guys. I think where do I think Diggs should be going? I don't think there's any reason he should have fallen from the 2-3 turn where like Cup has risen up to Devonta Smith is sitting there as a number, like a pretty clear number 2 that doesn't have any numbers that look like Diggs is. I have him ranked behind Diggs. I have DK Metcalf ranked behind Diggs. DK Metcalf does not like his target earning fell off last year. Yeah, he's big and he's fast, and I like the offense, and I'm trying to get more access to DK Metcalf, but his ranges of target volume earning plus efficiency are just not. I mean, he can break out. Like, he can have a really huge season. It could be the Metcalf year. Somebody in the chat earlier this year were like, it could happen for Metcalf. This could be the year kind of a thing. I have Diggs over Ayuk. Ayuk's really, really good, but Ayuk's going to get about 100 to 110 targets this year. He had 105 last year, and he's going to start slow. And I mean, you're just banking on all efficiency with Ayuk. I don't know, man. I don't like the ones where I'm the only one who sees it, and people are like really firm that I'm wrong on it, because, you know, it could certainly mean that I'm missing something. Usually when I see something that no one else sees it, I'll make the point, and then like everyone will be like, oh yeah, it's a good take. And then like I'll hear everyone else making the same point in the next like 2 weeks. It's like, all right, well, guess that's just the consensus take now. The Diggs thing I've been making since before I was bag defending. Like before, I wasn't even really drafting him that much of the 2-3, but once he started falling in the third, it's like, all right, I'm just going to take him like all the time. What, like, this isn't even a name, Meatwad. Darius, is this supposed to say Darius Slayton? They never played together. He earns volume in quotes. I just showed that he earns volume. Rewind 30 minutes, Meatwad. Yeah, Puka's another one who works hard. I like this point. The evidence that would make me concerned is decline in, you know, the peripherals. And Diggs did have some decline in yards per target last year. I understand that. I'm not saying that he's not at like increased risk at a higher age or any of that stuff. I already said that I have a ton of Diggs. I think I have like 30%. I don't know. I always have to look to see how much I missed in a Gretch stream. 103 minutes. I'm still so early. We're way past 103 minutes now, so I'm trying to catch up. Can we pivot to a new topic? That was only 4 minutes ago. Most of these comments are really vibes, which is why I feel pretty good about it. It's a lot of cherry picking, and it's a lot of vibes, and it's a lot of like, I mean, you can I think I made a strong case. You can take it or leave it. That's fine. We will pivot to a new one. I'm not going to keep like defending all of these one-off, cherry-picked, and vibes-based comments. I think they're not good analysis. And like for a good section of what I just scrolled through in the comments were, Rowan says, I don't think the yards per out run dip is cherry picking, even though it's happened throughout his career. I definitely, so the cherry picking comment was this: is Hopkins' targets per out run still elite? It was. He's like, he's a single old outlier that I am concerned about an age cliff on, because his efficiency was really bad last year, and just looked really different on the field. But yeah, his targets per out run were still good last year. They actually rebounded to a career high level, and that's okay. Well, I want to compare Diggs to the old guy whose targets per out run was good, but also there's some real risks with it, which I also had brought up. Devonta Adams, who's another one. I mean, it's fine if you want to put Diggs in that bucket, that's fine, but he's a little bit older as well. There's not. It's just going to sound like I'm just dismissing, but there's not much similarity there for me. The Diggs thing, the sticky stat is targets per out run. It's not yards per target, right? So the yards per out run dip, I can actually talk about that part of it from an analytical perspective. The reason I break it up, yards per out run, is targets per out run and yards per target. That makes yards per out run. The targets cancel, right? We're separating the two elements. Yards per target, everyone has said forever, is not a sticky stat. That's why I hate when people go, yards per out run is the best efficiency stat. Well, we used to always talk about receiving as opportunity and efficiency, meaning targets was opportunity and yards per target and touchdowns was the efficiency, right? Fantasy points over expected, whatever. If you think of targets as opportunity, which I don't, I think routes are opportunity. I think there's 3 elements to receiving, and it's a whole different model than we've ever really talked about, and I've written about this for 5 years. But routes are the opportunity. Target earning is a skill somewhere in between the middle. It's more of an efficiency, like skill. You got to earn targets. Some of it's opportunity as well, though. You're standing on the team, and those things do influence like first read targets. Then there's the after the target efficiency that I always write about in the newsletter, right? Yards per target, touchdown rate. The after the target efficiency is still not very sticky. It does fluctuate based on a lot of things, based on catch rate, based on whatever. Role usage, it can fluctuate. Really good players do tend to have sticky yards per targets, but it's not uncommon for good players to have their yards per target bounce around when their coordinator changes midseason and they start having their ADOT drop off and their team's like deprioritizing them, which everyone knows is part of what happened with Diggs. Is part of the reason you guys are saying he's bad now. But like, it was a shock to the system that explained why his after the target efficiency fell off. The part of yards per out run that's sticky is the target earning. Targets per out run predicts itself at a really high level because players tend to have similar roles. There are a lot of caveats with targets per out run, and I always use them. And that's why, when I write my targets per out run articles in March, I use it as a foundational element. But I talk about ADOT, I talk about role, and I talk about usage. You need to layer in all the other stuff. Believe me, I'm very diligent with this. Diggs' targets per out run was actually a career high last year. It was very, very high the year prior. It's continued to be very consistent. The mild fluctuations have tended to be the same as the fluctuations in his ADOT, which is why I was pointing out the weighted targets per out. His targets per out run was a career high last year because his ADOT came down a little bit. That's one of those mitigating factors. That's why I was going to weighted targets. I don't think we should say, he's had the best target earning of his career. Some of it's because his ADOT came down. The yards per route run static that we see is completely on the non-sticky side. And this is why, like I said, I don't like yards per route run as an efficiency stat in the classic sense, because classically we've talked about efficiency as after the target efficiency, yards and TDs. People like to say, well, it's yards per route, but there is a middle element of the route running that is the target earning. Then other people like to point out, and have pointed out to me, because I like to use targets per out, that yards per out run predicts fantasy points better than targets per out run. Think about the difference. targets per out run is predicting targets. Yards per out run is adding the yardage gained, which is fantasy points. And there's also another mild thing there where yards per target does track with ADOT. So the gap between targets per out run and yards per out run tends to include a depth of target element as well. Players who have high yards per target tend to be guys who have high ADOTs. That's why I like to look at weighted targets per out run and normalize the volume side, the target earning side for ADOT, because that is relevant to what types of yards per targets can be achievable, what's high or low relative to a specific ADOT, to a specific profile. So because of that, targets per route run are not going to predict fantasy points as well as yards per route run, which are adding in yards. And there is an element of efficiency that matters in addition to ADOT, that it's just like good players get yards, right? Two players at a 25% targets per out run. One of them's Ja'Marr Chase. One of them's Greg Dortch. Like, yeah, Ja'Marr Chase's yards per out run looks better than Greg Dortch's because his yards per target element's going to be better. It's not, we're adding in the yards component. That's why the yards per out run is going to predict fantasy points better. But targets per out run predicts itself better than yards per out run predicts itself. I'm pretty sure on that one. But I know that regardless of however these things predict themselves, it's sort of not even the point to me. I know what targets per out run is telling me, and I know why like yards per out run is predicting fantasy points. The people that say yards per out run is the best efficiency stat don't understand that the sticky part of yards per out run, that it makes it the best efficiency stat, is the target earning element. It's not the yards per target, right? Because everyone says yards per target sucks. The only difference between yards per target and yards per out run is targets per route run. That's what makes yards per target into a good efficiency stat. Yards per target's bad. Yards per out run's good. It becomes good because of targets per route run, the ability to earn targets, which traditionally has not been considered efficiency. If you want to consider that efficiency, fine. Because like I talked to Karain about this stuff, and Karain's like, well, I call that efficiency. It's like, okay, well, traditionally in the fantasy landscape, earning targets was considered opportunity. In these models, targets are the opportunity element, expected points, whatever. All of which is to say that this is how I use this data and targets per out and those things, and to try to answer this question about but this is like his quarterback is Will Levis, man. Like this is not like there's always I gotta stop. I gotta stop with you, Rowan. I like you a lot, but yes, Nuke Hopkins was a 4th round pick. His target sprout run went up, and the cliffs hit, even though his target sprout run is sticky, improved. His quarterback's Will Levis. Like I wrote an article about this concept of tacit knowledge, how all these arguments have if A, then B, if C, then D. And there's always another caveat with fantasy football and football analysis in general. And that's the way that it works. We have to be very holistic in our analysis. That's why it's a cherry-picked comp. Like, I don't even necessarily think Hopkins would be a bad play if he was on the Texans. But the whole range of things that he can do is impacted massively. He's also a year older than Diggs. He's also had more injury concerns. He's also been less consistent with his target earning than Diggs has been in these later years of his career. Had an injury issue in that 1 year with the Cardinals. There's a bunch of elements. Like Diggs is not Nuke Hopkins. Stop talking about Nuke Hopkins. But also, if Nuke was with CJ Stroud, I'd be vaguely concerned about the young guys. And Hopkins is a true alpha. Yeah, he's a lot older, though. But that's the point. Is like Diggs isn't even that old and hasn't shown the concerns that Hopkins has shown. Anyway, I got to move on. I appreciate that. Black Money River here says, this is very well explained. Just learned more about fantasy in the last minute than the last 10 years. Great stuff. I mean, that stuff becomes... When I say predictive, I'm just talking about the prior season or a moving average. When I say predictive, I'm talking about the R-squared stuff that people love to use, which I've written about a ton that I don't even necessarily love. But it's this idea that things predict themselves, how well, whatever, you have the independent variable, you're looking at like you're building these models and you're back testing and you're looking at how well they predict that thing for the next year. And it's whatever variable you're trying to predict. So I was saying predicts fantasy points, and then I was saying predicts itself, like targets per run predicts itself. All right, I'm going to go make some more picks. We're going to move on from Diggs, although I'm going to probably pick Diggs some more. Oh, we started talking about it because I was on the clock in a spot where Diggs and Tank were the top two options here. Got Garrett Wilson. We got Debo. I got somebody messaging me that he's in one of these drafts with me. This point about you think the target spread run cliff point stands, and you want to see if players that hit the cliff have historically dropped off in TPRR and minus 1 year. I haven't done that like aggregate research. You could go ahead and do that. What I'll tell you is like the really elite players don't tend to hit cliffs. They tend to keep being pretty good and sort of start to drop off. Like Dwayne McFarland did a really good research piece on this year. He talked about the true elites and then the like second tier receivers and how they age differently. Time to move on from Diggs. Now let's take Diggs in the slow draft. I think Diggs' target earning profile over the many, many years that he's done it suggests that he's very clearly been in that first category of real elite talents, really high-end producers. We'll see. The great thing about all this is we will see soon enough. Gonna go ahead and add him to this team real quick. What do we got? We got a bunch of drafts left to do. I'm ready to skedaddle. I don't think we're going to spin the wheel. I'm not going to get through all the wheel spins anyway, unless you guys really want to spin the wheel. But yeah, we're just kind of doing the topics of the day rather than like that's more of an off-season thing. I started this team Tyreek and then I did Achane, which I don't usually do. But Bullock decided to take Olave one pick before me, like a total rube, and then I couldn't do Tyreek Olave, so I had to go Achane. Devonta Adams comes all the way back to the 304. We're just going to, I guess, take that value. There's probably a lot of Tyreek Adams Achane teams when Achane was going in the third. Probably not that unique anyway, but oh well. This is another Tyreek Achane. I did two of them and another one with Devonta Adams. Look at that. I really don't care. I'm just going to, like, I don't mind building the same team. One thing I noticed there as well is one of those was a BBM and one of them was a Schnauzer. So I have one of those teams in each contest now, or one of the starts in each contest. This is a Jefferson, Taylor, Stefon Diggs team. Nobody has taken a tight end at pick 44. 408. All right, we'll just take Sam Laporta. Got to get a little bit of exposure to him. We'll go over to the BBM streets. We got Breece Hall, Deebo Samuel, and T. Higgins here. We're at the 404. Laporta's on the board on this one as well, and I have Deebo. Sure. I have not taken a lot of Laporta, but get a couple bags there. Couple, I don't know, shares for the bag. This is a Jamar Chase team. If you look up taking a lot of Achane, and I just structurally, I want more like all receiver builds. So I'm going to make this a Chase Malik Neighbors team. I just took a couple Adams. I just wanted to take Neighbors. Just felt like a Neighbors pick. This is a Chase Nico team where I'm going to throw Metcalf on board. We're going to make that a 3 receiver start. That was a clear receiver pick. This is a Garrett Debo Diggs. We're back in the 4th, and we got T. Higgins to fall. No tight ends have gone. I am going to take T because I think that's somewhat bullish for the possibility that we get Pitts in 5. I don't know this historical anomalies. I don't know why there's no football. You tell me who sat here for 2 hours and no wheel spin. All right, we can spin the wheel. That's actually pretty fun. I'm almost caught up. These picks, I was thinking that these picks are going to take me forever, but I'm making these picks incredibly fast, as you're seeing. Justin Jefferson, Nico, Devonta Smith. We're at 406. Only Laporta off the board. I love, Trey McBride in this range. Kelsey's still there. McBride's still there. But 55 is going to be a nice sweet spot for possibly a Kincaid fall, or then I would have Pitts to bring up. And I can just take Rashee Rice here. Oh, I could take Josh Allen. He's actually the ADP faller. I have him a little lower in my ranks than some of these guys, but I have him ranked right at ADP. I could take him at I have 3 receivers to start. Let's do a Josh Allen team here. And then we're going to really hope that we can get Kincaid in the 5th. But if not, I was going to do Rashee Rice, but this is a Jefferson, Nico, Devonta Smith start. I mean, I got 3 good receivers. I go Josh here, and I hope that Kincaid falls to 55 from his ADP of 52.2. Definitely a plausible outcome when Kelsey in this room has fallen, 4 picks behind ADP now. McBride's still there. Andrews is still there. We have some cover. 3 mini schnauzers coming up these next 3 picks. One's a Christian McCaffrey pick. We'll do some more Devonta Adams. I'm not trying to take a ton of Adams, but that's a schnauzer. I'll take another pick of him. I do think he has a pretty strong volume profile. And I realized that was pretty light on him. Is this the Neighbors pick I just made that swung back around so quick? Okay, we got Kupp and Devonta on the turn, Tyreek Hill and Neighbors. Let's do a Kyron. Haven't taken a lot of Kyron in this batch yet. That's a schnauzer. We'll play the early running back game in the schnauzer. We got a Jefferson Olave here, and it's Stefon Diggs time. I never take Derrick Henry. Took him in the main last night. I could take him. I never take Pacheco. He's the one that I'm like, fine. I should probably get a little bit of Pacheco, but I don't want to. All right, you guys don't want me to take Diggs. I could bring Allen all the way up and then take Kincaid in the mid-4th to make sure I get an Allen Kincaid, which I think is a really fun stack. I could take Flowers and then bring Lamar up. I could start doing, setting up a stack here. I'm not doing enough of that kind of stuff. This is a schnauzer. Let's do another Allen. I don't have much Allen at all. I'm actually way low on the elites as they are, but I know that I made some Lamar teams. I did a couple Lamar Andrews, and then I went out of my way to get a couple Lamar Zays like this in my last batch. I don't think I have an Allen Kincaid anywhere in my portfolio, probably. So I liked that idea. We're going to try it again. Here's a big eliminator where I started Jefferson, Olave, and I'm back up in the 3rd. So DJ Moore's buy is really favorable in the eliminator formats. The week 7 buy is a good one. Devonta Smith is an early buy, which also matters. DK Metcalf, the week 10 buy is also pretty fine. I don't seem to run into a lot of week 10 issues. It's going to be one of these 3 guys. People taking a lot of running backs in the eliminator, which is nice. I like that. I think they need to get balance. I tend to disagree. Did Jefferson's ADP just shift in real time? I swear to God, I was looking at this and it just changed. Somebody rewind their show and tell me if this ADP just changed. How much of an edge is lost by just drafting for week 17? It did change 5.4 to 5.5. That's wild. I was like staring off into space. you guys all saw that too. That's crazy. And I just like, I'm pretty sure that changed just now. Did you have rankings on and not for this contest? Yeah, I forgot to upload for the Eliminator slate. You have to upload the rankings for each of the slates independently. So I'm always kind of annoyed by that. I'm pretty sure these are my top 2 ranked, Devonta and DK. Sorry, how much of an edge is lost for just drafting for week 17 and ignoring bye weeks in the Eliminator? I mean, if somebody's doing that, you're losing. Yeah, you're losing quite a bit of an edge. I think the Eliminator is a really complex contest. I've talked about it a lot. I've written 2 articles about it, done multiple shows. The last show I did, me and Bime4 talked about it a ton strategy wise. So I would check that out on the YouTube channel, or the one he and I did on Spike Week a while back. Was it like a strategy one? We got Jefferson and Olave. I got to go with a pick here. And I mean, I was saying earlier, I think that I'm going to be DK over Devonta now. Devonta gets pushed up like largely because of the Lamb correlation, but I mean, his profile is just not. I don't know. All right, I'm going to do Metcalf. He's got a week 15 or a week 16 with Jefferson. I'm using as sort of a tiebreaker. We get a little bit of a schedule benefit. I mean, I don't really want to take DJ Moore in this. I don't know if I want to take. Yeah, all right. I got ready to click Metcalf and started questioning it. Yeah, only a couple more drafts here. Let's hop into this other schnauzer. We got Lamb. We're just going to go Lamb Olave. That's an easy one. A schnauzer here. Amon-Ra and Olave. Ready for Stefon Diggs. All right, fine. I'll take a DJ Moore. It's a schnauzer. There you go. I skipped Diggs for you guys. McCaffrey. Was this a BBM? Yeah. I'm back in that spot. Do I want to go McCaffrey, Achane, Kyron? Let's do a McCaffrey because I did McCaffrey, Achane, DK last time. Let's do a McCaffrey, Kyron. And Devonta Smith this time. Slightly different little maneuver. And the mini schnauzer, McCaffrey. Oh, I took Devontae Adams and then didn't take the second pick here. I was on the turn. McCaffrey, I took Devontae Adams and a schnauzer and then didn't realize I was on the turn. Yeah, we'll do Devonta Smith because Metcalf shares his bye. Can't go down to Diggs. Good Lord. Can't draft that guy. Tank Dell's going to beat him out. All right. Here you go. Your wheel of names. Let's remember some guys. All right. The Browns. A good one for remember some guys. You got like Braylon Edwards. You got like Peyton Hillis. You got like Jordan Cameron, Brian Hoyer, Josh Gordon. They had some really fun, random fantasy star 26 QBs in 10 years as historical anomalies. Yeah, there's a lot of QBs we could name. Jason Campbell, Spurgeon Wynn, Jeff Garcia was their quarterback for a while. Josh Cribbs, Terrell Pryor, those are good ones. Who's Ben? Ben Gay is not a player. That's what kids used to call me because it's like an athlete's what is it, a icy hot type thing. That was the middle school dig. Are you thinking of a different player? Because you're actually like giving other real names. Was he really a running back? Oh my God, I don't remember this guy. Benjamin Stevenson Gay was a real NFL player for the Browns for one season. 21 years old. He got 55 touches and then never played again. And you remember this guy? It's amazing. Amazing. Josh Gordon. William Green's a good one. Joe Juravicious. You got Mike Hawkins. You're thinking of what is it? Mike Hawkins. 1980s linebacker? No, you're thinking of Andrew Hawkins. Short wide receiver. He's a fun dude. Yep, Jordan Cameron was a dude. Greg Little. Rashard Higgins. Oh, man, I liked Rashard Higgins way too much for a few years. That's a good one. There are so many good names in the Cleveland Browns. Remember some guys? Encyclopedia. We're just going to go in. We got to do the encyclopedia. Their best passer before Mayfield every year. Kaiser, Kessler, McCown, Hoyer, Campbell, Whedon, McCoy 2 years in a row. Quinn, Anderson. Remember Derek Anderson? Led them to the playoffs, I think. 10-6. Did they go to the playoffs this year? Maybe they didn't go to the playoffs, but they were good that year. That's the year with Braylon Edwards and Jordan Cameron. They were 8th in points scored, it looks like. That was a sick year. Charlie Fry, Trent Dilfer. There's a Jeff Garcia year I mentioned. Kelly Holmcomb, and then 4 years of Tim Couch. But like basically a different lead passer every year. Basically a different lead runner. They had drones for a while. Jamal Lewis late in his career. Little Jerome Harrison here. Little Peyton Hillis. Trent Richardson. Willis McGahee. Terrence West. Isaiah Crowell. And then finally some stability with Chubb. Gary Barnage. Muhammad Massaquoi. Whew. These are great. These are really good. Antonio Bryant's a good one. You can go back to their 80s teams. Ernest Biner, some of those dudes. He had the fumble, obviously, that led to the drive for John Elway. Browns fans are not fans of that. Dennis Northcutt. My home league, we had a guy who would draft Dennis Northcutt every single time. Shout out Kyle Cole. Every year. Kevin Johnson. Dennis Northcutt had like one good season, and he took him in the 4th round the next year. It was like when we were pretty young at fantasy. He was like, that Dennis Northcutt guy, gotta have him. Gotta have him. Fantastic. Ben Watson. Duke Johnson. Surprised none of you guys said Duke Johnson yet. Kellen Winslow Jr. is another good one. All right. Donovan Peoples-Jones. Remember that guy? Still plays, but not very well. All right, the Browns, I don't know. Browns analysis is basically what? We don't know how soon Nick Chubb will play, but when he does, I assume that he's going to take a lot of work from Jerome Ford. I think Jerome Ford's your starter. I think Pierce Strong's probably mostly your backup. We've talked about this a little bit, but he's going to play on special teams. Deontay Foreman, there's a chance that, I mean, especially after Chubb comes back, that Foreman's not even active or on the roster even potentially. Let's do the yards per out run database on the receivers, because my take has been that there's too big of a gap between Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy. I don't really want to cape for Jerry Jeudy, but again, so Jeudy last year, the targets per out run fell off a little bit, but he had been in the 20s each of the first 3 years of his career. Solid yards per target typically. Yards per out run was scaling up before it fell off last year in the Russ offense. But still, 1.6 and above every year of his career is pretty solid. Amari's coming off a career high yards per out run. But if you look at his targets per out run ranges, they are mostly non-elite. They're in the 20 to 22%. It's the same kind of thing of what I was talking about with DJ Moore and those guys. You need yards per target to go with that, and he can definitely provide that. And he had a huge year last year. And I think he's an intriguing play from that regard. But as far as what Jeudy could do, I mean, they went and traded Jeudy, and then they did this. $41 million fully guaranteed money right there, right? That's a lot of money. They didn't have to do that necessarily. They extended him. He's got a bunch of void years at the back of this contract, but we're in 2024. Look at this dead money over here. Dead money. 4 years. They think Jerry Jeudy's worth, locking in a lot of money over a lot of years. $41 million fully guaranteed. Receivers get a lot of guaranteed money, but that was a pretty big deal for Jerry Jeudy after that trade. So you go back to, okay, he's younger. What does his role look like in this offense? Can he be a 20 to 21% targets per out run guy? And is Amari kind of just in that same range? Look at these ADOTs, right? They're all very similar. We're talking 11-ish is the average for a receiver. We're talking typically above average, but they've both had seasons where they've been slightly below average, but typically in the 12, 13 range, right? And we're talking about yards per targets that are in the same range at these ADOTs, which I like to do the depth adjusted racer with the air yards, right? And so it's the far right column in this. Amari Cooper's depth adjusted racer over several years is typically really good. He's typically solidly above average in depth adjusted racer, but so is Jerry Jeudy. This is controlling for high ADOTs and then what their yards per targets are. They're pretty good players. When I go through my projection process and I adjust for these higher ADOTs, I'm comfortable giving them a pretty decent yards per target projection as it relates to that. And I mean, ultimately, I go through the process of these guys and I add in a layer of age where Amari's, he's not old. He's very similar to Diggs in this regard. He's 30. But it's getting up there a little bit. The difference there is they were talking about trading Amari and moving on from him with Cleveland, and they traded for a 25-year-old youngster and gave him $40 million this offseason. The difference with Diggs is the Texans traded a second-round pick, man, to restructure him to a one-year deal to have him for this year. That's one of the things that I probably didn't emphasize enough, but plays a big role in my mind. When they trade a second-round pick for him for one season, it's different than what is going on in Cleveland with Amari Cooper, where he was presumably, and even tweeted about it, a part of a potential Brandon Ayuk deal. Jerry Jeudy's still only 25, was a young prospect. I don't think he's particularly great or anything, but I do think there's way too big of a gap between these two in ADP. I think, you do kind of have to reckon with that element. So that's, sort of my take on those two receivers. They're the main two that matter. Elijah Moore, for example, with that this depth adjusted stuff over here on the right. I was showing you guys that the other guys have been good. Elijah Moore's been low key, pretty bad. Even just being average. My model is not perfect, and so being average is usually pretty low. If you're negative 0.08, you're pretty bad in terms of what your yards per target is relative to your ADOT. His ADOTs have actually been kind of high, and his yards per targets have been consistently not very good. His catch rate consistently not very good. I mean, Elijah Moore's probably not a huge threat. So you go look at what is the pass game? I guess the other thing is Njoku, who I've talked to, a lot about, is a really interesting one. People like to say that, the Joe Flacco stuff is all that matters. He got up to a career high 23.1% targets per out run. See how never had been anywhere near there on 520 routes, which was a career high. So he's added volume and added per route, efficiency with the earning the targets or volume or whatever you want to call that part of it. Lowest 8 out of his career, which is an important caveat, right? 4.8. And that was largely because he got a lot of targets around the line of scrimmage, a lot of block and release outlet passes, but he was really good at that, man. Like he was running over dudes, jumping over dudes. He's super athletic. I think, that's Flacco's game. He's not going to scramble. He likes to check down. And Njoku was his check down more than running backs. And that's why you got all these targets and then his ADOT falling. It's an average, right? But I think it's really interesting to consider, and it was a career high yards per out run as well here. So, he ends up having a really strong season. I think it's interesting to consider whether the Browns would be like, oh, we really liked unlocking this new usage for Njoku where he does these block and releases and he's our outlet receiver and we dump off to him. And if that's something that they want to go to, it's some kind of a clip, he could keep some of the targets. I think he's going to lose some of them. I don't make him a huge priority, but he's tight end 11. He's definitely the last of a certain group for me. And then there's a pretty big break after that in terms of who's available beyond him. So he's a guy that I can see a little bit of ceiling with. And so where I was going to go is back to their depth chart and be like, okay, what does this mean? I think it means that the passing game is basically Amari, Judy, and Njoku. At one point this offseason, I thought there was a little bit of depth here. And I just really don't when I get into the projection because I don't think Elijah Moore is very good. David Bell's not done anything. Cedric Tillman's not done anything. Jamari Thrash is a 5th-round rookie, probably going to make the team. But you have basically Judy and Amari, and I think Elijah Moore running a lot of routes, but probably not being great at them. And Njoku, the secondary tight ends have been in the equation in the past. You're down to just Jordan Akins. They don't have Harrison Bryant anymore, any of these guys. You're probably not getting a ton in the passing game out of these running backs. So I do think it's somewhat concentrated, and I think that's a reason that I probably should have more Amari than I do. But I think Judy's just such a nice arbitrage on him. They're relatively similar profiles. He's younger, and he could just be the main downfield guy. And then I also play Njoku a good amount. So that's how I play these guys. As far as the offense, this is also really important. I wrote about this recently, but I quoted friend of the program, Jacob Sanderson, who talked about how Alex Van Pelt, the Patriots offensive coordinator, was their guy in Cleveland the last couple years and couldn't get, the Deshaun Watson offense working. They let him go. They bring in Ken Dorsey. What Ken Dorsey did a lot of with Buffalo was the spread passing offense. He's the guy that got fired midseason last year. And then the offense went to the Joe Brady offense, which was a lot, shorter. And we were just talking about the offense changed a ton for Stefon Diggs. But Dorsey, going from Van Pelt to Dorsey and Jacobs read is very clear, admission that we want to try to build a spread pass friendly offense for Deshaun Watson. And then you look at the running back room, obviously with Chubb hurt and everything. And you're like, okay, I do think the pass rate's going up for these guys. And so I think Deshaun Watson is unfortunately a really solid late round pick. He's got some mobility. We've only seen him play 6 games the last 2 years. He's been terrible. We all know he's been terrible. He's only played 12 games. He's not even played 2/3 of a season yet. And it's been a very weird 2 years as far as, by his own creation. But as far as it goes, he missed a whole season. He had to try to work back. He had to deal with the fact that people fucking hate him now. That's just a very human reality thing. He's mentioned that in press conferences where, he's more or less used to it. The comp that I've made before in the past many times is Tiger Woods after he came back from his scandal. It's not the same exact off the field situation. Tiger Woods' situation wasn't sexual assault. But when Tiger Woods came back, he went from golf courses all rooting for him to a lot of people booing him when he would walk up to tee boxes and talking in his backswing and trying to mess him up. And then eventually he got good again. He ended up winning another major later. But it took a little getting used to the new normal. It changed his mentality, I think, on golf courses. I wondered going into 2022 if Deshaun Watson would have a similar effect. That's when I started this comp. You're going to start walking into stadiums where people are going to tell you you're a sexual abuser, basically, and yell shit at you, especially in away games. But even in Cleveland, I think they were like not necessarily always super supportive. Yeah, only played 6 games both of the last 2 years, but he's dealt with some of that stuff. Yeah, I'm just suggesting that he's had a very, as far as fantasy football is a stats-based game, I'm suggesting that he's had a very non-linear progression to the last several years of his career. And so if he were to randomly recapture some of what he did earlier, and we know he had some really great seasons, his last full season in Houston, he led the NFL in passing yards, and he added mobility. He was a fantasy force. If you were to tell me that he has the possibility of regaining that, I would say I'm not that surprised, because it's a really unique, wild situation as far as, you know, I would be surprised. I should say I'd be surprised. I'm not like smashing him in the late rounds, but it wouldn't like, oh, what does this mean for your analysis of you know, his career progression? I'd be like, I don't know. His career progression is like not analyzable, is sort of what I'm trying to argue. That we shouldn't read too much into the fact that he's been terrible over a 12-game sample over the last 2 years, because we don't know anything, really. So they want to pass a lot more. They still have a ton of guaranteed money sunk into him. I looked this up the other day because it's like, when can they get out from this contract? We all know they gave him a ton of money. They're already into year 3. This is 2024. They still have $200 million in dead money. This is guaranteed salary column here. It's still $46 million into 2026. So they still have 3 more years of basically fully guaranteed money to give him. They want to get him right this year, and then next year, and then the year after, right? Like, this is not, maybe in 2025, if it's still not going well, maybe they'll throw in the towel. This is not the year where they're going to throw in the towel. He's only played 12 games on this contract. This is the year where they hired a new offensive coordinator to throw the ball more and to try to make it work with Deshaun Watson. They went and got Jerry Jeudy. They gave him a bunch of guaranteed money. They are trying to make the passing game work any way they can. They have to. And so I do think it's a passing game that's pretty underrated. Somebody asked me in a comment on one of my posts, one of my newsletter posts, which you can always subscribe to. Look at this. I can do this at bengretch.substack.com. You can always, somebody, the sentence that I started was, somebody asked me in a question. No, I don't remember the question. I got so excited about sharing this banner. I don't even remember the question. It was a Watson question. Had to have been, right? But I don't remember the question. Oh, they asked me what teams are like underrated teams. They said, like last year, where everybody was kind of out on the Rams, and the Rams had all these guys go off, Puka and Kyron. And I think people use the Texans as an example of last year too. One of the like who's somebody that the market's sleeping on the whole team. One of the teams that I think we could look back on and be like, everyone was sleeping on the possibility for the whole team is the Browns. I mean, it's gross. Nobody wants to say it because it's Deshaun Watson. But I mean, I'll just I'm sick of talking about him too. But if we look back and we go, yeah, I mean, whatever. That was the team that was good. The Browns have shown us that they want to throw this offseason. They brought in Jerry Jeudy, and Njoku and Amari are both coming off career high yards per outrun numbers that look good. They tried to get Ayuk as well. They want to do a pass-first offense and a passing team. And if Watson rebounds, like I said, to some facsimile of what he used to be, this could be a team that, looks really good. By the way, I was doing that banner. I always forget to do the promotional stuff, but please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get to 3,000 subs. We're not even to 2,000 yet. Somebody mentioned earlier in the stream they subscribed, liked the video. We were at 1.8K though. We're very close to the 2,000 plateau. I got to figure out what the 3K giveaway is going to be, or what kind of fun thing it's going to do. The guys in the ship chasing channel were talking about me doing some type of live stream driving to the Oregon border. Maybe that would be something. If we can get to 3,000 before the start of the season, I'll drive down to the Oregon border and do some live big dog and stream it in my car or something. I don't know, something ridiculous. Definitely will be something with the 3,000. Think about it. Let me know. what you guys think would be a fun thing. I've been trying to think about it. What would be a fun thing for hitting 3K, 3K subs? But we got a lot to go too. So you guys got to like, you got to subscribe. And then if for any reason you haven't played on Underdog yet, or you want to subscribe to Underdog, you can always use promo code Signals. So yeah, go ahead and use that as well. Got the Underdog promo code. We're back on the clock in one mini schnauzer. It's a Tyreek Hill team. Cooper Kupp has moved ahead of Devontae Adams. They have the same bye, though. Tyreek and Kupp. I do like taking Kupp here. And I don't know if we really talked about why, but part of the Diggs thing as well, and part of the Kupp thing, it's not a hyper confidence in the Diggs thing or the Kupp's going to stay healthy or not hit the cliff or anything. When we're drafting these best ball teams, we're thinking about ceiling outcomes. We know that a lot of them aren't going to advance. We know a lot of them are not going to work. You start thinking about the players that you're fading or you don't have a strong position on. You got to think about how do they bury you? Stefon Diggs can bury you, man. From the late third round, he can be a very strong season guy. And then Kupp, I mean, if he's just the number one, also can bury you. Gretchen Kitchen traffic draft stream. That's fantastic. Drive to Montana and take out a bear. I mean, that doesn't even have anything to do with best ball. You just want to do the Revenant. I love it. I love it. You guys are thinking outside the box. That's what we need around here. All right. I am going to take Malik Neighbors to shut down this stream. We just want to get more Malik Neighbors. Historical Anomalies likes the idea of setting up the camera in my vehicle and streaming the trip. You could all be on the road with me. I like that too. I think that would be a lot of fun. As long as I can figure out a good way to do it where I can hands-free drive and not get in a wreck of any kind. Not sure that my wife wants to be my producer for a 5-hour road trip. She's not super keen on riding along for those. So I would have to figure out some creative stuff to make that work. But you know what? I look, I'm incentivized for sure. All right, we did it. It was fun. We're caught up. We talked a lot about Stefon Diggs. We spun the wheel even. Got the Cleveland Browns. Talked a little about them. It's a fun stream. Like, subscribe, comment after the stream. Appreciate you guys. Find someone on Fiverr. Oh, pay somebody to ride with me? Yeah, see, I mean, I would need a passenger for sure. I guess, yeah, I mean, this is good. We're spitballing here. I would need a passenger. I could easily get a buddy to do it. I got to just find a buddy that'll ride with me and talk some football. I think I could find somebody. All right, guys, signing off. It's been a blast. I will be back on Wednesday with Jacob Sanderson. He's coming back on Wednesday. We had already planned that one out. I had planned the one out with Bime for yesterday, but I had also asked Sanderson. He didn't know if he could make it. So I was like, hey, if you can make it, jump on. He jumped on this week as well, but he'll be on next Wednesday. I'm out this weekend. Probably won't be back on the stream until next Wednesday, but you will see me here next Wednesday, either in the morning or the afternoon. I don't know when. Until then, this has been Stealing Signals. Later.